order by the clerk. Councilmember Berman. Councilmember Burt. Here. Councilmember Holman. Here. Councilmember Klein. Here. Vice Mayor Niss. Councilmember Price. Here. Councilmember Scharf. Councilmember Schmidt. And Mayor Shepard.
Here.
6 present. Council will be going into closed session conference with City Attorney, Legal Counsel, potential litigation relating to Mitchell Park Library and Community Center construction, significant exposure to litigation, and potential initiation of litigation. The second closed session is conference with City Attorney, existing litigation, Golan versus Allenby, San Mateo County Superior Court.
Put this.
Returning from closed session on the Mitchell Park Library, and we do have reportable action. So I'd like to read out that the council met in closed session to discuss anticipated litigation related to the Mitchell Park Library and Community Center. The council voted to direct staff to initiate the contract dispute procedure under paragraph 14.4 of the contract by serving Flintco Pacific with a notice of contracts dispute in anticipation of proceeding to formal direct negotiations, mediation, and arbitration. Our next item on the agenda tonight is a study session on public safety update and threat hazard identification and risk assessment. This is a presentation on the Threat Hazard Identification and Risk Assessment Report, which is a collaborative planning process initiated by the Office of Emergency Services and will be used to inform ongoing planning efforts throughout the city. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Ken Duker, and you have both of our chiefs here with you.
I do. Thank you, Honorable Mayor and Honorable Council. It's an honor to be here with you tonight, along with Chief Burns from the Police Department and Chief Nickel from our Fire Department. We're going to do as brief as possible overview of an extremely complicated topic this evening and allow adequate time as best we can for questions. Our agenda tonight is to talk about this threat and hazard identification risk assessment process, also known as THIRA. Some people call it THIRA, tomato, tomato. That'll be the bulk of our presentation, followed by an update from each of our 3 public safety departments. I'll be running most of the slides today, but both Chief Burns and Chief Nickel have their respective slides as well. On the topic of THIRA, this was one of the recommendations from the 2011 OES restructuring report that was commissioned by City Manager Keene, and at the time, there was no THIRA. THIRA came out the year after, but it was basically a mandate for the city to get ahead of federal requirements and to better understand the risk to our local community. So it's a new DHS FEMA best practice, and we're only, I believe, the second jurisdiction in the entire Bay Area to have completed one, the other being the City and County of San Francisco. So that's all very nice. But really what it's meant to do is to allow us to have an empirical basis to allocate very limited resources, not only in public safety, but public works, utilities, even our libraries, all city staff, and other government resources, and align that with the hazards that we believe we face. I'll put an asterisk on that. As much as we're trying to be empirical and scientific, so much of this is based on projection, if not conjecture. So, the process was based on a very wide base of stakeholders, ranging from our community emergency services volunteers, some of whom are in the audience tonight, to Stanford University, the Stanford Medicine Group at the Stanford Hospital, and so forth. The reason for that is, while we wanted the perspective of a third-party, arm's-length outside consultant to tell us in an unbiased way what our risks are, at the same time we wanted to make sure that we were capturing all of the other jurisdictions and entities, whether it be non-government or community-based organizations, as well as our neighboring public safety jurisdictions. and then amalgamate all the feedback into the THIRA report. For those who want to get down in the weeds, you're welcome to read CPG 201 from FEMA. It is exhilarating, but I'm going to spare you the details. We've kind of boiled it down to its essence. Really, it says that all communities in the United States are supposed to comply with the National Preparedness Goal, which involves having a community, and they're quite specific about highlighting that word. They use the phrase whole community, which is meant to be very organic and encompassing, and that all members of your community are supposed to together form the team that is going to develop 31 core capabilities. And that's in the slide, in the THIRA report. I'm not going to go through all 31, but some of the highlights, for example, do we have a means to, in a timely way, get messages out to the general public in the event of a flood or a criminal event or another hazard? And I know this has come up several times before, but there are a lot of less obvious ones too that are required, such as, are we as a community able to recover from whatever Mother Nature or evil humans might throw at us, or, by the way, accidents? So that's the three categories. We start to view risk not as earthquakes over here and crime over there and a flood all by itself, but instead to put it on a continuum of risk in the three categories that THIRA advocates, which are natural disasters, technological, and human-caused deliberate malicious acts. The most important part of this is, again, that we're going to look at the risks not for the sake of sport, but because we want to make sure that we're using our resources effectively and that we're engaging all elements of our community to work together with us in concert to mitigate the risk, respond to it, and recover from it. The desired end state of the process, and I should point out that this is the first time, obviously, that we've done this. This document is a living document. It will be revised in toto every 2 years, and quarterly OES will be looking at that in conjunction with other city staff. So it's a living document, and it's nowhere perfect, but it's a good first start. We hope to gain from the process an improved understanding of our community risk, but most importantly, localize. It's one thing, for example, for the federal government to say, well, cyber terrorism is a concern. That is of academic interest only until you lose your email system or the city's databases crash, or you lose, for example, utility functions because somebody hacked your utility. So localizing it, putting it in context, and making sure that these are not just scripts from some Hollywood thriller, but they're in fact something that we're going to use here in our city to respond, recover, and mitigate. The good news is that we in the city have been doing this for some time by adopting the emergency management cycle. And there are two pieces of it. One are the phases that I just alluded to, this prevention protection phase. The old Ben Franklin saying that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure predates FEMA, I believe. So all that mitigation that we want to do. And Chief Nickel will talk a little bit about his approach to community risk reduction in that same context. Response and then recovery. To facilitate that, in the old days, one would say, well, we've written a plan, super, we check the box. And that's really a false way of looking at the world in so many ways. So the preparedness cycle is a way to make sure that we're doing this in a systematic way on an ongoing basis. The phase we're at right now, as we discuss THIRA, is the plan phase, which is the first highlighted segment of that circle that you see before you. Based on the plan, and this is one component of many plans, of course, then we seek to organize people, we train our people, we get equipment, we conduct exercises, maybe Mother Nature or real events test us as well, and then the cycle starts again as we learn from our mistakes and we try to improve the next cycle around. So, enough background. Here are the threats that the stakeholders and our outside consultant identified in the three respective categories. I think Napa, the recent earthquake, of course, reminds us, not that we need reminding, that we're in a very seismically active area and it is of concern to us. Flood, severe winter storm, it's hard to think about in the middle of the drought here in summer, but depending on what El Nino does and the status of so many other things that Councilmember Burt can tell you about that have delayed the ability of us to protect our community with levees and other mitigation measures, we are still greatly at risk from that flood and severe storm category as well. As we move across to the other columns, these are probably things that many of us don't like to think about, but we have been exposed to airplane accident, for example. February of 2010, we had a rather unusual case, a tragedy for the people on the plane, the Tesla executives who crashed into our one and only connection to the grid, as it turned out. So that was both an airplane accident, but also in the category of disruption of utilities as well. Hazardous waste, hazardous material spill, again in the category there of accidental as opposed to deliberate. Fire chief can tell you more about the kinds of risks we face here, but they range from obviously the businesses who do business here to rail cars coming through our community at 2 in the morning. We have a fair bit of that. Urban fire, it was a close tie, by the way, with wildland fire. We do have a pretty large wildland-urban interface. It's of great concern right now with the drought, but because of the density of our housing, the age of some of our architecture, and the possibility that our ability to be notified about it could be disrupted from an earthquake or a power outage, urban fire is on the list. On the deliberate malicious category, major crime, and if you take a reference to your booklet, the Thyra report, you can get definitions of, by the way, what all these mean. I know that we'll have some questions on that, as well as how did we come up with it? What's the methodology? Major crime, I know that's going to raise some eyebrows. We don't have a lot of that in Palo Alto, but we're not exempt. Our neighboring community of East Palo Alto right now is on a tactical alert from a homicide that happened several days ago, followed the day after by a drive-by shooting, and they're still on edge. And so what impacts our neighbor could impact us. Cyber attack, if Dr. Reichenthal were here or his staff, he could give you some more in-depth view, but the city of Palo Alto has already suffered numerous cyber attacks, some of them more serious than others, including a denial of service attack to our 911 center. Hostage assassin. We certainly hope and pray that this does not become a reality for us, but we have a lot of people with a lot of wealth and a lot of prestige who could become targets of either of those types of attacks. The other category is sabotage. So the theft there is a bit of a red herring. It really means a deliberate removal of equipment in that case is theft, but the sabotaging, for example, of a utility substation, such as we saw about a year ago at the Metcalf PG&E facility. Many people don't know that not only did people shoot the transformer with rifles, but they also maliciously cut the fiber lines nearby. And finally, workplace violence. We think about school shootings, we think about shootings at movie theaters and malls, but unfortunately, workplace violence primarily occurs in the workplace. And so that's something with all of our employers that we need to pay attention to, and we've been responsive to in public safety at the request of entities ranging from Stanford University to the hospital to other partners in our local business community. The other point of this is that we don't need to get bogged down about this particular scorecard. We're certainly cognizant of the fact that we could have the proverbial black swan event. We had a presentation at our awards ceremony for our emergency services volunteers where we brought in, believe it or not, an astrophysicist who was here to talk to us about coronal mass ejections. And if you haven't studied coronal mass ejections, you could Google it. It's basically a giant sunspot that puts out X-ray and other radiation that could disrupt the power grid and wipe all of our smartphones, which would be tragic in its own right. So just because your disaster du jour does not appear on the scorecard does not mean that we don't take cognizance of it. For example, tsunamis. We are technically out of the risk range of tsunami. However, San Mateo County is not. And because we provide mutual aid to and from San Mateo County, an impact to them is nearly the same as a hit to us. So we take cognizance of all risks in the greater area. I want to call special attention to the topic of earthquake and building safety, since we just had a reminder courtesy of the Napa quake. I have staff here from both the planning department and the development center who can answer any questions that you may need answered in more depth than I can. But we've prepared some statistics there on the screen regarding the two big categories of buildings that are known to be problematic in a seismic event vis-a-vis soft story and unreinforced masonry. So soft story are typically your 1950s and 60s and somewhat 70s buildings that have a large unbraced parking garage at the bottom, followed by usually a multi-story edifice on top. And the problem with them is, as seen in Northridge and other places, they tend to collapse catastrophically, and it looks like there never was a garage under there to begin with. Unreinforced masonry, certainly Napa had a lot of bad experiences with that in their recent quake. Basically, it's brick buildings that are not adequately secured and tied down. We have gone, by the way, from 23 UMBs, 44 UMBs in 2004, a decade ago, to 23 today, some of which is accounted for by the seismic bonus retrofit program that was enacted nearly 30 years ago, but probably the majority from just normal rehabilitation and construction, primarily downtown where most of these buildings are. In the soft story category, we went from 130, only lost 6 in the past decade. So the planning staff and the building development staff are available if you have any specific questions, but they are researching building code and municipal code options and best practices from the jurisdictions listed there. Do we want to pause at this point on that topic or continue? We'll continue. The recommendations, the outputs of the THIRA are extensive. I've hit a few highlights here. Really one of the big ones is to update our emergency operations plan to be in alignment with the current federal guidance. This guidance applies to all government agencies throughout the country, whether it's a municipality or a school district. We all have to follow the same guidance. And our emergency operations plan is really old school right now and needs to be updated. This is a major undertaking, and the good news that I have to share with you tonight is that we recently obtained a $100,000 emergency planning grant, not only to update our EOP, but to do it in concert and coordination with our partners, Los Altos, Mountain View, and Sunnyvale. You'll note in Chief Burns' presentation that we already have a strong partnership with them as well as Stanford University for our Tri-Cities CAD dispatch program. It dovetails very nicely with what we call our joint planning environment for North County. The other implicit value of doing a joint plan is that, for example, if Sunnyvale needed assistance from us, from our staff, we could more readily go there and be speaking basically from the same playbook, if you will, and vice versa, of course. So that's a big advantage. Some other things I want to highlight, I won't read all this. With regard to environmental sustainability efforts, obviously the city is very strong and takes it seriously. I've worked with Gil Friend and others in both Public Works and Utilities, as well as City Manager's Office, to make sure that we are capturing all of the benefits that we should be getting. It's great to do things to reduce carbon footprint. It's even better when, for example, the photovoltaics that you put up can yield benefits when there's no power. Because if it's grid tied only, you'll be quite upset that not only is your meter not spinning backwards, but you can't use that power when there's no grid. So I wish I had more time to go into more depth, but there is plenty of work to do on that score, and we'll continue. The final piece, and it's certainly not the least, is the very serious amount of outreach we've been doing with our community. You have before you a handout on our latest Community Emergency Preparedness Fair. This is one of nearly 100 events that OES has supported in this calendar year, ranging from Airport Day, which is another event, by the way, on the same day. So we're actually going to be in 2 places at once on the 28th. We have over 400 emergency services volunteers throughout the community. These are our neighborhood preparedness coordinators, our block preparedness coordinators, our community emergency response team, CERT members. We even have a new medical reserve corps. And there are many others, from ham radio operators to Red Cross shelter volunteers, who are under our rubric and umbrella, and I'm very proud that they're part of our team. So the other pieces that I want to make the council aware of, and we're going to turn it over to Chief Burns here in a second for his update. In addition to what I mentioned, we've made big investments in people and we've made big investments in technology and facilities. If you haven't had a chance yet to see our somewhat newly remodeled Emergency Operations Center, please avail yourselves of that. If you haven't seen our Mobile Emergency Operations Center lately, we've actually done some very large upgrades to that as well. If you're not coming to Airport Day, please let me know and we'll arrange a different tour for you. The rest of this is, I think, self-evident, and we've discussed this. So in the interest of time, I'm going to move it over to Chief Burns.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. Dennis Burns from the Police Department. Just a couple quick items about some of the projects the Police Department's got underway or has recently completed. Ken referred to the computer-aided dispatch system that we've been working on for literally 6 years. We finally completed it in March of this year. That's in conjunction with the cities of Los Altos, Mountain View, as well as Stanford University. And that allows us a greater interoperability and ability to have situational awareness and share resources with our partners. The next phase of that is just began. It's our joint records management system with the same agencies, and that way we'll be able to share information in a more streamlined fashion. Really quickly on crime trends, the crime trend I think that we are the most concerned about, other than violent crimes, which is, has stayed steady and low, is residential burglaries. Our burglaries are actually lower than they've been. We're trending towards one of our lowest years in recent years, and we want to try to stay on that. We've done that because we've been fortunate to have made some key arrests, shared a lot of information with our neighboring agencies, and we've had the opportunity to have more of the traffic officers out in the neighborhoods, as well as our downtown folks when they're not working downtown, working in the neighborhoods. You also see the school resource officer, thanks to re-implementing the second school resource officer. We reinstituted that in January, and that officer is working at Gunn while the other one works primarily at Palo. A couple other quick items. You'll see some new patrol cars coming pretty soon for the first time in over 20 years. We won't be driving the Crown Victorias. We'll be driving some Chevy Caprices. There'll be 6 coming in next month. We also implemented our in-car camera system. We replaced that. We had initially, we'd had a system in place for 7 years. That wore out. Thanks to the council, you approved the purchase of our new system, which is operational in all of our patrol cars. And we're continuing to work with Public Works for a site for the new public safety building. So in the interest of time, I'll stop here. Thank you so much.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, Council, Eric Nickel, Fire Chief. Just to give you a real quick update on some of the exciting things that are going on within the fire department. The first one, unfortunately, is not great news. I mean, the wildland fire risk and potential is made all too painful and evident. I mean, just this afternoon, 100 homes were lost up in Weed, California, with a fire that started in the interface up above town, and the wind basically carried it through, and it was an urban fire burning through the town. We still have 47 days left of declared fire season. That takes us through November 1st. And looking at all the predictive models here in the Bay Area, we can expect to have, above average to extreme fire conditions really through the end of fire season. The other scary thing that's happening is because the fuels are so drought stressed, you're having firefighters that are deploying or being burnt over. And again, this afternoon, upon the fire that's burning outside of Pollock Pines, the King fire off of Highway 50, there were 11 firefighters that had to deploy their fire shelters in order to save their lives. So the fuels are just very, very dry, very, very drought stressed. Fortunately here in town, we've staffed the Foothills Fire Station. We opened it up early in anticipation of the fire season. We've been actively working through the Fire Safe Council, trying to mitigate some of the fire hazards and fuel hazards up there. We're currently working on the community-driven strategic plan, so we're implementing some of the things that the community said was important to them, and that is external communication, that is improving how we interact with the community and how we report our performance to the community. Some of the things that we're doing internally is our internal communication, succession planning that I've spoken to you before about, basically passing the baton, getting ready, the next generation ready, knowing that we have 1/3 of the department that is eligible to retire in the next 5 years. The third thing that we're planning for, and this is probably one of the biggest success stories in the modern day fire and emergency services, and that is the celebration of the paramedic program. So next year will be the 40th anniversary of the Palo Alto Fire Paramedics. And we are anticipating recognizing some of the original paramedics and celebrating some of the the great work that they've done here in the community for the last 40 years. You know, we're driving to change the fire department to better serve the community around this ALS and paramedic level services, which leads me to the next item, which is operational deployment efficiencies. So as of early next year, every Palo Alto fire apparatus will have a minimum of 1 paramedic on it. We will be all paramedic all the time for the first time in the history of this organization. Every fire engine, every ambulance will have at least 1 paramedic on it. We're trying to build capacity into the system by responding to calls differently. So whereas a fire alarm call might have gotten 3 or 4 fire engines and a ladder truck, we know statistically that these fire alarms rarely result in a fire. It's a malfunction of an alarm system, and we're committing too many resources to that incident. So we're working closely with the alarm companies, we're working closely with the industry nationally to respond differently to these types of incidents with perhaps only 1 fire engine now instead of 4 or 5. Because out of 100,000 of these fire alarms that would be generated, maybe 5 of them are actually a real incident. It's dust in the detector, it's construction workers, it's a spider web in the smoke detector, there was a surge in the water system. I mean, it could be a variety of reasons, but we're responding to these differently to maintain resource availability for the calls that invariably come. As Chief Burns spoke about some of the regional improvements, the Tri-City CAD has been brilliant on the fire side. It has allowed us to do some things that are serving the communities better. And the things that are working out right now between Palo Alto Fire and Mountain View Fire is that boundary that's there on a map does not exist for operational purposes. The closest available resource, irregardless of the name on the fire apparatus or the location of the call, the closest available resource goes to that call. So we're actually seeing improved performance in response times down in the south part of town because we're getting the closest unit there. And from my perspective, you know, when there's an emergency, the fastest we can get a unit there that are trained to the same standards and they're running paramedic engine companies, that's the most important thing to serve those communities. And then the last thing that we're working on is, as you've heard me talk about before, community risk reduction, which really goes hand in hand with what Ken Duker has been talking about here tonight, about finding and identifying ways to reduce risk in the community. We're going to be taking on 2 very small projects with the money that, through your leadership council, that you allocated to the fire department to hire a part-time public educator. We are going to be specifically targeting the high-risk groups of people age 65 and over, who we know disproportionately use our services, and the young groups, which we know nationally are at much higher risk of injury or causing fire. So those are the 2 target groups that we're aggressively going to be working with through this budget year, through this fiscal year, to really try to reduce risk in those 2 communities. So those are some of the things that are going on in the fire department. And with that, I'll go ahead and turn it back over to Ken for any questions.
And that concludes our formal presentation. We're available for comments and questions.
I do have one speaker on this, but we can go out to colleagues first. Councilmember Klein.
Yes, I wanted to get back to our unreinforced masonry buildings and the soft first floors, and what you're thinking about and what the timeline is for bringing something to the council on those programs?
Good. I'll call staff up who can answer that, both Hillary and Peter's groups.
Thank you, Mayor Shepherd. Council members, Hillary Gittleman, the planning director. We had discussed with staff here that the most appropriate approach might be to assemble ordinances from other jurisdictions and bring those forward to one of the council committees, probably to policy and services, and talk about applicability here in Palo Alto. We could go into more depth about the program that's been effective here, the incentive program, and talk about what some other strategies might be, just learning from other jurisdictions. We haven't discussed timing, but we'd be happy to do that. Peter?
On that same note, we'd be prepared also to have conversations about how we could re-engineer the building code to ensure that as buildings come back online after a natural disaster or at the time of reconstruction, we can require heightened enhancements of those unreinforced buildings. But we can definitely have those conversations going forward.
Well, just to follow up, to see if we can get a little bit more clarity on that. What are your thoughts on a timeline, even though you're not proposing one precisely, but since earthquakes don't respect timelines, I just worry that we might be missing the big one by delaying on this.
Thank you, Councilmember Klein. I think we could easily assemble other model ordinances and a short summary of how other jurisdictions have handled these issues and have it ready for a committee, within 30 or 60 days. It's not
what?
Between 30 and 60 days.
Okay.
It's not a huge task, and we recognize that it is potentially critical.
Thank you.
Councilmember Schmid?
Yeah, thanks very much for keeping up, I guess, an intense effort at emergency preparedness. Council, especially this evening, is somewhat sensitive about information which is public and information which is not public. And I noticed that there's a part of the thorough report which is not public to either the council or the public in general. If you could just articulate, what it is that is in that document that is not available.
Yes, thank you very much, Councilmember Schmidt. We actually chose to disclose as much of the report as we deemed responsible. If you look at other jurisdictions, most of the public-facing document is a summary, maybe a couple, 3 pages, sometimes a little bit longer. The only pieces that are really redacted out of this are items either having to do with specific critical infrastructure, tactics that we don't want to disclose and are exempt from disclosure under FOIA, as well as the scenarios that were discussed to basically prod the conversation among the stakeholders. Otherwise, you have the entire THIRA here.
Yeah, I think it is helpful since the community has been so actively involved in preparedness to try and share as much as possible with them. So thank you very much.
Councilmember Burt?
So I have 2 questions. One on your flood control measures, and then I want to follow up on Councilmember Klein's inquiries. So Ken, you and I spoke last week, and you briefed me on the whole series of measures that you have been doing and have on the horizon that are essentially elevating our flood preparedness beyond levels that we've achieved before. And could you briefly just give us a little more explanation of what you've done and what we have in store this fall?
Certainly. Thank you, Councilmember Burt. There's really a 3-pronged approach to our preparedness. The first of all, and it's kind of the obvious piece, it's just the engagement of all city staff. The last flood event that caused an EOC activation was on Christmas Eve of 2012, and we kind of call that the Murphy's Law formula, which says that Something bad like that's going to happen when most of your staff, including your experienced staff, are out of town. So we've been broadening the bench strength, if you will, to ensure that it's not just resting only on public works or public safety, and that we're including all other players who could reasonably come to assist in the EOC and even in the field. So maximizing our staff existing resources is element one. Element two, and this is the one that historically has been a conundrum because the San Francisco Creek that floods, it happens to also be the county line, and that presents some jurisdictional and administrative challenges that we've been trying to super. Specifically, our approach to that has been regionalization and making sure that we have a common understanding of what would trigger us to, first of all, notify as a courtesy, do what we call that a courtesy heads up. For example, the city of East Palo Alto is getting worried. They're seeing something that we perhaps are not seeing or not aware of. Before we even get close to an EOC activation, they now know whom to contact in the surrounding jurisdictions and vice versa. That's piece A, if you will, of item two. Piece B is really more important, is that since the near flood of 2012, we've moved from only planning within our jurisdictional silos to deliberately implementing regional training, and that includes workshops, seminars, discussion groups, and last year we did a pretty large, for the first time ever, workshop with a tabletop exercise that had, I believe, over 50 people from both counties in attendance, and that included city managers, it included the Red Cross, it included all of our possible partners. And then element three, which is a bit down in the weeds, it's just operational coordination. I'll give you an example because it's best to just speak specifically. One of the concerns we had in December of 2012 is that the Santa Clara Valley Water District was coming, as they always do, in their capacity to assist us, and yet we had no knowledge of where their units were, where their personnel were deployed, or even if they were being tracked in any way. So we are actually now in possession of their radio frequencies, have that loaded in the Mobile Emergency Operations Center, and rather than playing the telephone game, when they come into our jurisdiction during the next flood, we'll be able to coordinate and communicate directly with them. So that's just an example of the third element. Does that provide enough depth?
It does, and I'm also aware that our upcoming event that is essentially has been Quakeville the last couple of years, we might describe as Floodville this year.
Correct, yes. So it'll be on the 20th of September. It's our annual community-based exercise. We actually have several of them, thanks to Nathan Rainey and other staff who are here today. So we moved off Quakeville for the same reasons we're looking at Thyra in a more broad way. We don't want to have an implicit statement in the name of the event that we only care about a certain risk. So yes, this year is Floodville, if you will. It'll be a storm major flood scenario where we activate our CERT, our BPCs, our NPCs. We'll be doing radio communications testing and some other exercises in anticipation of what we hope to be a storm that's big enough to solve our drought, but not big enough to flood us.
Good. And then following up on Councilmember Klein, and because this is a study session, we can't make motions, but what I'm going to be interested in is, I think at the time of Councilmember comments where we can request certain things to be agendized, that may be the proper procedure to actually formalize this, but I'm going to be interested in not only what Hillary had spoken about on the updated, and you had on the updated inventory, and then returning to perhaps Policy and Services Committee on this a prioritized list among the unreinforced masonry and soft wall buildings, and not just a inventory of other jurisdictions, but most interested in the most aggressive programs that jurisdictions have taken, and with a focus on moving from merely encouraging or incentivizing to really a future where we're going to cause these changes to actually happen. And then within that, an interest in a review of the existing programs that do support these retrofit measures, and what gaps exist that might be filled in those programs. We have an upcoming study session with State Senator Jerry Hill, and he's had a great interest in emergency preparedness, and I suspect that if we were to identify some state initiatives, he may be interested in supporting us through legislation. So those would be the areas that I'll try to summarize maybe later under council comments to bring it back in a formal way. Right, thanks.
Thank you.
Councilmember Price.
Thank you very much. I always appreciate your presentations. I want to commend all of you for your coordination and your commitment to this kind of work. It's really critical for our community. I have two questions. The first one is, as you know, within the Ed Code, schools are required to have school safety plans. So my question is, to what degree do the actions and recommendations in this report that we're seeing in front of us related to threats by humans deal with the issue of training, prevention, et cetera, for active shooters on school campuses and school safety plans?
Great. So I'll take that first question since it's on the board. So we have a comprehensive approach to work with not only our public schools and PAUSD, but also our private schools. We're coming into, for example, the Jewish high holidays. I've just completed some training for a number of our synagogues and Jewish schools on that topic, but it's something that we actually have been doing for years. So even though the THIRA is highlighting, for example, the risk of terrorism and active shooter type events, this is something that both the police department and the fire department have been working on for some time. I'll let Chief Burns talk a little bit about what our school resource officers do with regard to the Code Red training in a minute. But as far as the California State Education Code, I alluded to this briefly, but to put a fine point on it, the schools as government entities, as special districts, are also obligated to follow the national planning goal. However, THIRA is not mandated for schools or any municipal governments at this point. It's simply a recommended best practice. We included schools in the invitation. We obviously are working with them on a routine basis to make sure that we're all on the same page with regard to risk. And I'll get specific on one of the tasks that we're doing in OES. One of the challenges we have, and I don't think it's unique to Palo Alto, but it sure seems to be poignant here, is the massive amount of new construction on school campuses. Well, that presents a problem for us when we show up in a police car or a fire apparatus and the chemistry building got moved 2 semesters ago and we don't know where it is, or there's a modular building where Eric's guys think they're going to drive the fire truck. So it sounds mundane and trivial, but actually doing an interactive update of all the maps so that they're linked to our new computer-aided dispatch system is a massive effort, and we believe actually we're one of the first communities in the Bay Area to fully integrate that. It's a project now that's probably about halfway done, and we believe it'll go fully online next calendar year. So that's an example of a kind of boots on the ground tactical project that we've done in conjunction with PAUSD to start with, and we'll roll it out to all the private education facilities in the future. Chief, do you want to talk briefly about Code Red?
Yes, Code Red is an exercise that our police officers, specifically our school resource officers, coordinate twice a year at every school. They work with administrators and the teachers as well as the children, and they walk through how each classroom should respond in the event that there was an active shooter. And then they do a debrief afterwards, and we have the officers come in and talk about what their roles would be, their responsibilities, and their priorities. Additionally, I should tell you that the police department hasn't done a specific THIRA, but the active shooter scenario is very high on our list, and we practice those tactics and techniques quarterly. And the scenario could be at a school, could be at a church, could be at a business, but we take it very seriously, and we want to try to be leaning forward into that scenario, even though obviously we'd hate for that to happen here. Thank you.
Thank you. The school safety plans has been an issue for a long time. I'm going to continue to follow that. I feel very strongly about this. The second point is under the report, under organization, it says maintain an OES staff that is trained to develop, manage and coordinate and implement all of the Palo Alto family of emergency plans, of which is it THERA? Is that the correct pronunciation? Is one of 5 listed here. So my question is, it's my understanding that in earlier reports there was an assessment regarding in an ideal world the staffing that would be appropriate in order to manage these complex coordinations, reports, and all of the issues raised in this report. So could I ask you to briefly summarize what those recommendations were?
Absolutely. So the 2011 report commissioned by City Manager Keene, to which I alluded before, recommended that there be 2 emergency services coordinators reporting to me as the director, or whomever the director was going to be at the time. We were very fortunate to have one of those filled, but the other position is not. Our workaround to that, given the fiscal constraints, is really to make sure that we're tapping into other staff resources, both in the fire department and the police department, as well as utilities and public works and otherwise, which of course is a partial solution because it's not dedicated staff. And the other part, as I mentioned, is regional planning. Many of these plans may say Palo Alto at the top, but they may as well also say Los Altos or Sunnyvale and so forth. So as best we can, realizing that there is less efficiency in some cases as far as getting things through all the various other government agencies that have to chime in, that's been our approach with the lack of that other FTE.
Thank you. In the past, we pressed hard to reinstate the second school resource officer, and we were successful, and we're thankful that Chief Burns moved ahead on that. My observation would be, I know we're not in a position to take action, is for us to very seriously examine this and the possibility of increasing the staff by 1 per earlier recommendations in order to make it feasible and manageable for these very critical services and programs, et cetera, to really come to fruition. I think if we don't look at this more seriously, it could be a very dire mistake. So I would like my colleagues to seriously consider this in terms of a potential budget modification or whatever it might take, bringing it to the attention of the city manager. And thank you again for your fine work.
Thank you very much.
Councilmember Byrd had a follow-up question.
Yes, I just wanted to mention under this debate on pronouncing it Thera or Thyra, I believe that Councilmember Price has it right, and that the inventors of the acronym appreciated that Thera is the Greek name for the island of Santorini, which is the home of the former island of Aquarius, which had the gigantic volcano resulting in horrendous quake, fire, and tsunami flood, the trifecta of all natural disasters. So I think they were trying to remind us of the risk in the acronym.
So Thera it is with a bureaucratic double entendre.
All right, Councilmember Holman, you get to follow that.
Thank you so much. Well, I'll follow that actually with praise for our 3 lead emergency staff here, and appreciate all of you also being at the Midtown Chili, the ice cream. Well, you had chili there, Chief Nickel, but the Midtown Ice Cream social yesterday. Appreciate your presence there. So 2 of the things that I have always focused on and will continue to focus on are audible alarms. I was reminded of this in kind of rather timely fashion last night. My next door neighbor's smoke alarms went off and woke me up in the middle of the night. And it just reminded me what an effective tool they are. And yet we still don't seem to be focusing on very inexpensive, practical, audible solutions to notifications. So can staff please respond to that?
Yes, I very much support the deployment of audible alarms. We actually had, like many cities in the Cold War days, air raid sirens and civil defense sirens. There's still one on Fire Station 1 about 2 blocks from here. And for whatever reason, that system became decrepit and no longer in use. But we don't have to go too far to see a very successful implementation of not only sirens, but actually mass paging. One is right here at Stanford University. In fact, every time they test it, they notify us because it's so loud, people in the city limits can hear it. And the other successful example is the city and county of San Francisco with a totally different topology and set of requirements. So it's certainly something I support us to look at. We currently have no budget to do that, and I don't want to belabor it, but staff is kind of stretched. But certainly I would support looking at that. It probably would be an excellent topic for the new North County structure, as well as our mutual aid agreement with East Palo Alto and Menlo Park, because again, the way the jurisdictions are laid out, Mother Nature and criminals and accidents don't tend to respect our city limits and boundaries.
It's true, and actually I'm going to push on this more. So I would like to know, and I hope colleagues would too, what kind of grant monies are available, what types of cooperative initiatives we can take, because this has been a question that's come up from members of the public too, not just this council member. And so I'd like to know what we could do to be more proactive and plan for this in the near future instead of just be supportive of it. With all due respect, I know you're supportive of it, but let's get some action here. I can't imagine it's a horribly expensive proposition. Maybe that's naive, but I can't imagine it's a horribly expensive proposition. You'll tell us.
It all depends on your relative perspective. I don't remember what it is off the top of my head, but it's since our chief financial officer is acting city manager, he will wince, I'm sure, at the cost. It's not cheap, but we would want to have a system that really does meet our needs, and we can certainly investigate the cost options.
Well, I think we know nothing's cheap, but it's all relative too. So,
absolutely. And
relative to how effective it can be in case of an emergency. Another one is if you could give us an update on what the status is of the alternative and backup energy and communications source.
So are you referring to our solar generator? Is that the project you're referring to?
No, I'm referring to...
Oh, the utility interconnect.
Yes, yes.
I am not the best person to speak about the status of it. I don't know if we have anybody here from utilities, but failing that. I know it's on Val Fong's work plan. Lalo, you want to chime in?
It's been probably about a year the last time I spoke to Val about it, and it was basically decommissioned, it just wasn't big enough to support a big enough event, and the maintenance of maintaining the equipment. But let me double check and provide a status, because it's been a while since we talked.
I would look forward to that. Hazardous chemicals and that sort of situation. What is the city's best response to that, and what are we doing? Whether it's I don't think we have any unreinforced masonry, but maybe soft story. Hopefully not housing of chemicals. What is the status of best practices having to do with hazardous materials?
Excellent question, and we've really been on the front lines working with, some of the neighborhoods and some of the users of hazardous materials here in the community. We maintain a very robust inspection schedule where we meet or exceed all the federal state requirements for inspecting these locations. So we keep a very detailed database of what's stored there, how it's used. We're even now looking at how it's brought in and out of the community, because we have required some of the users here to store smaller amounts on site that requires more frequent transportation into the community. So now we're putting some of the risk from that fixed facility onto a mobile vehicle that's driving probably from Highway 101 up San Antonio, up and down El Camino Real more frequently than used to. We inspect them very regularly. We have hazard materials trained personnel within the fire department, specialists and technicians. We have a couple more members that are just completing their training right now. The hazardous materials unit will be moving back to the Hanford Fire Station with some of the redeployment things that I talked about as of January 1. And then relating to the regionalization of our hazardous materials response through the North Bay fire chiefs, the work that we've been doing regionally, we have regionalized a hazardous materials response with the City of Mountain View Fire Department, and now we will soon be bringing in Sunnyvale. So essentially, for the same type of incident that you have only gotten just one fire agency responding, Palo Alto, we're now going to be responding all 3 agencies to that initial assignment. Now, that may mean, and that will mean, that the Palo Alto resources may be responding out of the community to Mountain View or Sunnyvale on occasion. We don't get a whole lot of hazardous materials incidents that are to that level that we need multiple teams, but in terms of supporting the community, in terms of keeping our people trained and practicing on some of the lower level events, and in terms of sort of that regionalized approach with hazardous materials incidents, we felt it was very prudent and a very smart idea that we work closer together.
Appreciate that. And when you say regular inspection, so we have one kind of high-profile situation here in Palo Alto. So does regular mean once every 6 months, once a month, once every 3 weeks? What does regular mean?
So to that specific occupancy, we inspect them once per the code, but we also inspect them once unannounced. So they're getting 2 inspections a year, which exceeds the requirement of what we're required to do. And anytime, and let me take it a step further, anytime there is a concern lodged from the neighborhood that maybe they smelled an odor, or they saw a delivery and they're concerned, we've been working very closely with the neighborhood groups that when we do get that, we're in that occupancy within 24 hours doing a follow-up.
So I guess a question, you don't have to answer this right now, but unless you are prepared to, but I guess the question I would ask is, there are a lot of occasions where we're doing more than what's required, but it may not match what is practically appreciated and supported by the community. So I don't know what the cost associated is with, or time associated with doing more frequent inspections, but if that provides more assurance and confidence in the community, I would support that.
And we too. I mean, you know, we want to work with all stakeholders, whether it's the residents or the occupants. I mean, the last thing that any of us wants, we all share the same goal. We don't want an event, an unplanned event occurring. Frankly, we have the capacity with our hazardous materials inspectors right now. One of the things that we've tried to get better at within the fire department is when the requests do come from the neighborhood, that we respond to those very quickly, whether it's a records request and we share the records, whether it's we think something happened, we smelled something unusual, we're going to go in there and take a look. And frankly, the business owner has welcomed that.
And that's great to hear. And one last thing about this topic is, you mentioned you're there within 24 hours, but if it's a smell, it's like, it's 24 hours, you know, smells dissipate.
So if it's a call, and we've tried to work with the neighborhood that if they do smell something, call the emergency number. We will certainly go out and take a look. But sometimes the calls have come in the middle of the night when we went in, there was nobody on site except for maybe perhaps a security guard. There was nothing under operation at the plant. And we followed up the next day with a thorough inspection inside the facility. But we have, you know, our message is, whether it's that neighborhood or any neighborhood in town, if you smell something that isn't right and you're concerned about it, give us a call. We'll come out and take a look.
In a timely manner.
Call 911. We will be there in 8 minutes
good.
or less, 90% of the time.
I just want to make sure it was clear to everybody. My last question has to do with, other people have talked about unreinforced masonry. Actually, the soft story buildings are of interest to me also, but it'd be interesting to know how many of those are residential versus commercial.
I believe staff from building inspection have that. I don't know if they have it handy, if they can come up, but we do have the stats.
I don't need to know right now. It's okay, but it is a question I think is important to understand as we look at a plan to how to go forward with this. So my last question really is, we have some really wonderful capabilities. Had an opportunity to look at the new vehicle yesterday and all its wonderful capabilities. And I know we have these agreements with, you know, Los Altos, Sunnyvale, but Los Altos, just across the way, if there's some way that we can better support their efforts to reduce crime, respond to crimes. It's a situation that's been going on for some time and doesn't seem to be getting better. So, and I know from talking to Chief Burns in the past that there is a lot that we do over there. The community doesn't really know that we do to support East Palo Alto in their crime prevention and crime response. And congratulations and thank you for doing that. But if there's some way that we can better cooperate with that community to address some of their concerns, I don't know if you have ideas or thoughts about how we might do that.
Just to clarify, do you mean Los Altos or East Palo Alto?
East Palo Alto.
East Palo Alto, okay. Just, I'll let Chief Burns chime in on the crime aspect, but we're certainly integrating them in our natural hazards and mutual aid planning environment. Again, the flood scenario is the most salient, but a fair bit of our exposure to criminal risk is really shared. So I'll let Chief Burns chime in.
Thanks for the question. And we do try to support East Palo Alto Police Department on a regular basis. In fact, we had 5 officers working over there on Saturday night and on Friday night after they had a series of shootings. It's a little bit of a unique situation insofar as that the way that the county boundary is actually the creek, and technically to follow the true mutual aid guidelines, they're supposed to call for resources within the county before they call us. We bend that rule, I think, appropriately, and whenever we're asked, we always try to help. I have coffee with their chiefs, both the Menlo Park Police Chief and the East Palo Alto Police Chief coming up next week, and we are constantly talking about different joint operations, how we can share information, how our detectives can work together. And we've actually been very successful. You may not read about it in the paper, but a remarkable cooperation going on, and it's great. It's kind of at different levels, both at the line level, supervisors and the managers. So we'll always continue to do that. We've had a long history of doing that. I'm very proud of our relationship over the years, and but we'll redouble that effort.
Well, I want to publicly applaud you because the public really doesn't know very much about the work that you do over there, and it's so much appreciated. And if there's anything that we should be talking with, as was mentioned earlier, Senator Jerry Hill is going to be meeting with us. If there's anything we can do to help, soften any of those more formal boundaries between counties to help facilitate that, please do let us know.
Thank you.
And thank you very much.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor Ness.
Thank you all for being here. I'm reminded listening to this that cities were really all about police protection and fire protection way back when, and they didn't spend most of their time on land use. So it's really great to have you here tonight. In particular, I want to ask Chief Burns this. You briefly mentioned CADS at the beginning, which is, as you said, has been going on for 6 years. Probably one of the most important and intensive communication devices there is. But because we do leave our city limits, without a moat around us, we can get in and out pretty easily. So describe how that is working so far. And I realize it was a long ramp up to get it to where it's really functional.
Thank you for the question. Right. So one of the reasons it took so long, and literally it was about 6 years, is we had to design it. And so we had to go through the purchasing process, obviously, and we had to work with the vendors, and we had to design what it was going to be. And literally, it was over 675 features that the product had to be able to achieve before we were going to buy off on it. So, working with 3 agencies and the university, it took a little bit of time. Previously, and it's GIS based, and I think Ken could probably describe it much better than I could, but if our old computer-aided dispatch system gave us a picture on the screen downstairs for our dispatchers and in our patrol cars and our fire engines, the picture would just be of the city of Palo Alto. But now the picture is of Stanford University, Los Altos, Mountain View, and Palo Alto. And on that screen is a picture or an icon for every patrol car, every fire engine, every ambulance. And so it gives everybody a great sense of what's going on. And so in the event that we had, say we had the fire again over here at the drugstore right here at Bryant and University that we had back in 2007, I believe, we could tell Mountain View, our neighbors, that, hey, we need to focus all of our dispatchers' efforts right downstairs on this fire. Can you dispatch for us on our police calls? And they'd be able to do that seamlessly. And you don't have that in a lot of different communities. We also have a joint radio frequency on the police side. It's called NORTAC, it's the North County Tactical Channel. So all of the agencies can talk on the same frequency. Additionally, in Ken's vehicle, it allows us to speak. He can link all these disparate radio frequencies together. But having this great situational awareness and having these great partners and building these relationships over the years, making us stronger when we talk about having these events that are occurring in Thyra. So we recognize it took a long time, but I think we're there now, and we're so much better off because of it. So thank you all for your support and patience on this project.
Thanks. I wanted to call that out because I think that is so sophisticated and allows such interactivity and increased safety and response for our community that it's incredibly important to have that in place. I don't know how many other communities do, but I don't imagine a great many have it as sophisticated. We always expect sophisticated anyway, don't we?
We have good people that do a great job on our technology.
Good. Okay, thank you all for being here. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I do have a couple public speakers, and before I let you go, I just wanted to thank you also for a meeting regarding the cyber attack and the Metcalf issue, along with Val from Utilities. My interest has been trying to figure out how to bring resiliency to the grid in order to harvest ourselves, our own power inside the borders of Palo Alto, because I think that is something that is significant and it's coming fast. And we are so unique with our own utilities. I have been asking that question at a couple of conferences I've been at, and some of the answers have been to try to bring triggers into the grid so that you have low voltage, that flips off first, so that you don't have the whole deconstruction of the station like we did at Metcalf. And yet at the same time, there is no strategy. If anybody were to go after that again, there is no resiliency there yet. But it is something that is a dream of mine as well. And I know you understand, so thank you for meeting and working on that with my dear friend who has put that at the top of his list to get done. We've got two public speakers. Our first is Seelam Reddy, and the next one is Art Lieberman, and you will have 3 minutes.
Thanks for the opportunity, and I think we have a great team here. I just want to add a couple of things very quickly. It's not going to take long. So I was at Boeing, and I was part of the team of incident management team. And the one thing important, if you haven't already considered, is to have a booklet, hard copy, and all the key people have that booklet with them all the time. So we used to give it to Jim McNerney, if you know who Jim is, right? So I think if you haven't considered already, please do, because as technology as it is, we could still lose all the technology, but you're bound to have an emergency response team that's going to do that. So I'm sure you've thought about it. The second one is actually rotating incident managers, so that if the chief is not here, the second chief is there, third chief is there, and be able to do it, practice it. So the third thing is a little bit sensitive, but there is a Rodney King effect. When Hawthorne teams couldn't handle them, they came to Manhattan Beach and rioted. So as we talked about it in another meeting, that happened. This was a true incident. The similar economic levels. Riots happen for various reasons. A court decision somewhere in Missouri or somewhere in the world can cause us to be angry with somebody and all that. So please consider that as one of those scenarios. I'm sure you have covered it, but that's a potential because it can proliferate. It starts in Oakland, it starts in LA, it starts here, there, and we could be impacted. Thank you.
Thank you. And our next speaker is Art Lieberman. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and distinguished council people and distinguished chiefs. Thank you. I want to thank you all for the great work you did in putting this report together. Looking at the recommendations, to me, they focus on how to prepare or deal with the consequences of some event after it might happen, some terrible event. But I think some emphasis is also needed to help city officials identify and avoid creating a hazard in the first place. It's easier to avoid creating a Humpty Dumpty than it is trying to put them together again after a great fall. Sorry, Ken, I couldn't help adding that in. Page 23 of the report, the consultant writes, quote, "Past land use decisions in Palo Alto have not always taken hazards into consideration," unquote. So I suggest an additional recommendation that planners should have training, all planners, so they internalize and include in all the reviews, even those that do not rise to the CEQA level, the hazard context of projects. For example, the conflicts and zoning incompatibility of projects that involve hazardous materials. So that a scenario we now have with CPI abutting residences in Barron Park should never happen again. I think, Chief, having been here for a number of years, that there has been a reduction in the fire department's capability in managing hazards of hazardous materials. I think it's natural. I'm not happy about this, but I understand it. Their responses require additional response for medical responses and other things and so on. CPI is also the only plating shop left of the 5 or 6 plating shops that were in the research park years back. Some of those former plating shops, by the way, those sites are the ground zero of the groundwater contamination that underlies Barron Park and the VA hospital and many research park properties, a hazard and a risk that we will be living with for many decades to come, not just days or months, as indicated on page 27 of the report, where it talks about the consequences of hazardous materials releases. And finally, I have a question, which is what is the OES doing in terms of implementing the Emergency Planning and Community Rights No Act, EPRA, which is to help American communities deal safely and effectively with the many hazardous substances that are used throughout our society? And that purpose is to encourage and support emergency planning and to provide local governments and the public with information about possible chemical hazards in their communities. If you have some way of enlightening us, I'd appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Would you like to make any comments from public speakers?
Certainly, I'll address Mr. Lieberman's direct question. I'm not familiar off the top of my head with that exact provision, but I can tell you that we're working very closely with all the neighborhoods, especially Barron Park and the Stanford Industrial Park businesses as well. As far as hazardous material disclosure, I'll defer to Chief Nickel on that.
Well, again, back to some of the things that Mr. Lieberman said. I mean, we are in compliance. All the occupancies that we inspect are in compliance with all the current prevalent, fire, hazardous materials, community notification codes. I think the work, I'm very proud of the work that we've done with both the Barron Park Neighbors Neighborhood Association as well as CPI to, given the scenario that was presented to us, make it the best we can moving forward, given, the close proximity.
Well, thank you very much. The next item on our agenda is a special item. It's special orders of the day, and we have 2 proclamations this evening. And I'm looking for did she step out? She's right. I don't see, for some reason I'm not eyeballing. I think she stepped out. So if somebody would like to go and find our, okay, her husband is texting her. I have a little mini introduction, so here she comes. So when Italian director Federico Fellini died in 1993, United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, also known as UNESCO, member states, had just adopted a general conference resolution calling for the safeguarding of the cinematographic heritage. Governments, industry, and the public were invited to participate in a campaign to keep the 7th art alive. The first Fellini Medal was awarded to the president of the Cannes Music Festival, and over the years, recipients have included Gerard Depardieu, Vanessa Redgrave, Clint Eastwood, and other international artists. In 2014, Jasmina Bojic, founder of the Palo Alto-based United Nations Association Film Festival, has been awarded the Fellini Medal, and we will be celebrating this with 2 Palo Alto proclamations. Councilmember Burt has been organizing this evening's affairs, and I will turn this over to him. Welcome.
Well, thank you. I'm honored to be able to read both proclamations, and so the first one is the recognition for the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, UNESCO, Fellini Award that was awarded to our communities, Jasmina Bojic, and it reads as follows. Whereas on May 24, 2014, the International Council for Film, Television, and Audiovisual Communication presented the UNESCO Fellini Medal to Jasmina Bojic, founder and executive director of the Stanford University and Palo Alto-based United Nations Association Film Festival, UNAFF, in recognition of her exceptional contribution in promoting the principles of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights through documentary films. And whereas the Federico Fellini Medal was created by UNESCO in 1994 to recognize major contributions in international film heritage, and whereas Jasmina Bojic originally conceived UNAFF in 1998 to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the signing of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in San Francisco, and whereas UNAF has become a highly regarded platform for intrepid documentaries with a stellar reputation amongst filmmakers and audiences alike, and whereas through the Stanford University Camera as Witness program created by Jasmina Bojic has become an invaluable tool in the education process, and whereas Jasmina Bojic brought together the cities of Palo Alto, East Palo Alto, and Stanford University to host academics and filmmakers from around the world to discuss issues through film. These films often included people separated by geography, ethnicity, and economic constraints. Now, therefore, Nancy Shepard, Mayor of the City of Palo Alto, on behalf of the City Council, does hereby proclaim gratitude to Jasmina Bojic for her UNESCO Fellini Medal and her promotion of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And before I go on to the second one, I have one quick question I've always wanted to ask, whether it was a bit surreal receiving the Fellini Award.
Definitely, it was surreal, and I would like to thank you so much for this honor. This is really fantastic to go from Palo Alto to New York, from New York to Paris, and actually connect all these 3 cities, because it's been my dream forever to do this, and this is what happened, and it is surreal. So obviously, I just came back from the Venice Film Festival, and couldn't be better, because this is one of the oldest film festival in the world, and it's also, they were celebrating Fellini in many ways, and now I'm here in Palo Alto just a couple of days after that. So it is surreal, but my dreams were fulfilled from 98 when I established the Film Festival at Stanford, and then connected this with Palo Alto, obviously, for the several years, more than 10 years that we have our cities now, and our streets are decorated by UNAF flags, which is, I'm always feeling like Alice in Wonderworld, because all my dreams are fulfilled, my flags are on the streets of Palo Alto, and my students from Stanford are coming to Palo Alto to see some of these films, so there is a connection, there is a bridge, and obviously this is our theme this year, Bridging the Gap, because we do connect Stanford and Palo Alto and East Palo Alto and San Francisco and the whole Bay Area, and we also bring Palo Alto in the map of the world, with all our international filmmakers coming to our city for 11 days. So it's truly a connection, and this is what I'm extremely happy to see both former Mayor Bert, who was our guest in many of our panels that we have at Stanford and Palo Alto, and our mayor and Liz as well, because it's been a long journey for all of us. But we succeeded to have this film festival for our educated, very thoughtful community in Palo Alto to have something different than just Hollywood films. So that's my gift to the community, and I hope to continue this for many years. And I really appreciate your help. Thank you.
Thank you. So before reading the second proclamation, I'd just like to reiterate that we're really fortunate to have this great internationally recognized film festival focusing on human rights. And there is nothing else like it in the world, to my knowledge. And this has been the vision of Jasmina from the time that she started this 16 years ago. And it has grown, and part of her vision has been to take it out of the Stanford campus and bring it first to the city of Palo Alto to build bridges between the university and the city, and now to engage with the city of East Palo Alto to further build bridges in that entire very visionary approach that she has had. And we're very fortunate. So I'll read the next proclamation. Too many whereases in one evening, but this is for the 17th Annual United Nations Association Film Festival. Whereas October 16th, 2014 marks the 17th anniversary of the United Nations Association Film Festival, which was originally created to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the signing of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And whereas UNAF was founded by Stanford educator and film critic Jasmina Bojic with the participation of the Stanford Film Society and the UNA Mid-Peninsula Chapter, a community-based nonprofit organization in Palo Alto. And UNAF gives 5 awards: the Grand Jury Award for Best Documentary, the Grand Jury Award for Best Short Documentary, the Stanford Video Award for Cinematography, the Stanford Video Award for Editing, and the Youth Vision Award. And UNAF has previously screened some of the most honored and talked about documentaries, including 7 that went on to win Academy Awards and 23 that were nominated. And UNAF celebrates the power of films dealing with human rights, environment, women's issues, homelessness, racism, disease control, universal education, war and peace, and the theme this year of Bridging the Gap. And the UNAF jury selected 70 films for this year's festival, dealing with topics from countries around the world. And UNAF will now be held October 16th to October 26th, 2014 at the Aquarius Theater in Palo Alto, at Stanford University, in East Palo Alto, and in San Francisco. And UNAF hosts academics and international filmmakers to discuss the topics in the films with members of the audience who are often separated by geography, ethnicity, and economic status. Now, therefore, Nancy Shepard, Mayor of the City of Palo Alto, on behalf of the City Council, does hereby proclaim October 16th to 26th, 2014 as United Nations Association Film Festival Days, and encourage the citizens of our community to attend the UNAF opening night at the Aquarius Theater and other UNAF screenings.
Thank you so much, and I think this is probably very unique in the history of the city of Palo Alto to get 2 proclamations. I don't know if you ever had that, but this is a very honored to have, and obviously we are looking to our wonderful mayor to join us for the opening night on October the 16th. And I just wanted to add that we are screening 70 documentaries from almost 50 countries, and obviously whatever is happening in the streets right now in Syria, Afghanistan, Iraq, Iran, of the countries of Morocco, and some of these places that we never ever seen in our TV or the media will be here in Palo Alto. So I really invite our members of the council and also our mayor and also the community of Palo Alto to join us through your publicity. And I have to thank to Thomas Perberg.
Let you make sure you get that into the microphone.
To the microphone. So I'm inviting the whole community, obviously, of Palo Alto. And we do have a 30-second trailer, which was just finished. So I would like to ask my husband and to thank him also for all his help to bring us. And Maggie is going to give you the bookmarks. Our wonderful assistant Maggie will give you the bookmarks with all information about the festival. So, yeah, if you can see that. And I would like also to thank, there were several members of the UNA here, so I would like to thank them also, and some of my students from Stanford as well. So if you can see, can we just play the, yeah, it's only 30, it just finished actually, just finished a few hours ago. This is a trailer for our 17th UNAF. Yeah, this is going to be a premiere of the premiere of the premiere. And tomorrow we do have a press conference. We are going to announce the program for our 17th UNAF, and from Wednesday we'll have all information on our website. So, okay, we did play film once here in the city of Palo Alto. So I mean, we played once the film, the whole documentary. So. Oh, that's great. So we can get the volume, sound. It's only 30 seconds, so. And if this is too complicated, I don't want to give you if this is. I mean, if nothing else, you see the image. It is a bridge, and there are some obviously photos from the different films.
Is there a voice on this? Or is it
Yeah, there's a music. There's music. So, but if you just saw that the images. So if there's no possibility for the sound, that's not a problem. And I also want to just mention that we are going to have a small reception. Now you have your meeting here, but we'll have a small reception in the UNA store, United Nations Association store, right now. So, for all of us who would like to join us. Great. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Oh, here we are. Woo. Great, thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It's really wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. It was really great. Perfect. Great. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Well, that was a nice break. And we're going to go to agenda changes, additions, and deletions, which I don't have any. And Councilmember Holman, you have your light on?
Yes, I would move that we bring item number 11, the response to Santa Clara County's grand jury report, forward ahead of items 9 and 10. So we keep more to the timing it was scheduled and provide better public access.
Okay, do I have a second?
Yes.
All right, why don't we go ahead and vote on the board? That motion carries unanimously with Vice Mayor Niss walking. She's going to say yes, so it is unanimous. All right, thank you. Anything further? And I see nothing, so the next item is City Manager comments. Lalo, Mr. City Manager.
Good evening, Lalo Perez, filling in for James Keene, City Manager. I have two quick announcements. In keeping with the spirit of public safety, the Palo Alto Office of Emergency Services and the Stanford University Department of Public Safety are hosting a special public education session on public safety, crime prevention, and emergency preparedness. This event will be held on Tuesday, September 23rd from 7 to 8:30 in the evening at 3160 Porter Drive. To reserve, please go to the city's website at citypaloalto.org/emergency volunteers. Click the calendar link to sign up for the event. This session will also have special information for residents and businesses in the foothill area, such as evacuation procedures. On a fun note, a reminder that on Saturday, September 27th from 3:30 to 8 o'clock, the city is hosting an event. Come Together is the title of the event. And this is a concert to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Beatles' British invasion at the soon-to-be-open Mitchell Park Library and Community Center. As of today, the online sign-ups for the many docent-led tours have completely filled up, including the ones in Chinese and Russian. We are looking for ways to find additional tours in the near future. There's a high demand for them. There will be a lot of fun activities, including a mixer on the new basketball court and a concert by Beatles cover band, the Sun Kings, that begins at 6 o'clock on the Palo Alto Little League field. For our younger audience, we could not get One Direction cover band, so I apologize for that. But bring your friends and neighbors for what promises to be a great community event. That's all.
Okay, thank you. Now we have public comment, or excuse me, oral communication. And I have two items here, or two speakers. Our first speaker is Jessica Roth, to be followed by Vic Ojakian, and you will have 3 minutes.
Hello, Mayor, Council, Jessica Roth, California Avenue merchant. I spoke to you a few weeks back regarding California Avenue and trying to keep it to small businesses and keep its local flavor and charm. Since then, we've put a petition in a few of the stores on California Avenue and also online, and we have about 480 signatures so far. We have had an amazing response from people, very enthusiastic about our petition and our cause. I've put together a little packet for you guys. I've done a little bit of research. The laws are not my strong point, but there are other cities in the United States that have done things like this, zoned certain streets for to limit the number of chain stores that can come there and actually promote it as being an area for small business. There are also quite a few comments from the neighborhood surrounding California Avenue in there, just little blurbs about people that support the idea of keeping California Avenue's unique charm and making it a place for small business to thrive. Thank you. Please help me. The biggest question from people is it too late already? And my plea to you is, let's not make it too late. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Holman, I see your light on. Is that intentional?
Yes. Question for the speaker. Could you provide the city clerk with a link to your online petition so we can see what the petition itself is?
Yes, definitely.
Okay. And city clerk can distribute that to council members and public.
Okay.
And thank you for your efforts. Much appreciated.
So I'm really new at this petition thing, and so I need help getting it, getting the right language. So it's very basic as of right now, but I hope that we can get to the point where it can be, I guess, a little more professional.
Given the number of responses you've received, I think your language seems to be pretty clear. Thank you.
Okay. And Hillary, did you want to? Yeah, you can connect with her. Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. And Vic Ojakian, to be followed by Mark Weiss.
Thank you. I'm Vic Ojakian, and as a former Palo Alto City Council member, on numerous occasions, I and my colleagues got to hear comments about reducing the council size. And on each of those occasions, we rejected that notion. To date, because of Measure D being proposed now, in my own opinion, I've heard no compelling or substantive arguments to reduce the council size. I didn't hear any 10 years ago, and I'm still not hearing any, so I'm not even sure why we're discussing or having this matter on the ballot. But to that end, I will say, I'm going to go through some comments, but I will leave them, because I'm sure I won't get through all of them. I am going to say that I feel like the voters of Palo Alto haven't gotten much information on this ballot item, and my concern is that it will actually get passed just based on lack of information. So the comments that seem to be made in favor of this proposal is that other city councils have a smaller council size, that somehow this is going to create some efficiencies, and then in fact it's going to be cost effective. And I'm going to speak to each of those matters. So on council size, I would say I ran a chart of all the cities in Santa Clara County. And in fact, if you do look at the ratio of council members to population, we're sort of in the middle of the pack in terms of representing the people that we serve. If you run this a different way and drop the two major, the smallest and the biggest city, so you have most of the other cities that are of relative size, we meet the average in terms of representing the amount of people that we have. If in fact we reduce the council size, we'll go 20% over that average. It's a significant difference in my opinion. Separate from using a formula like that, and I'm sure people will come up with other ones, the fact is that this city has a series of services that are not typical of other cities, and they include things like having an airport that we are planning on taking over just when we drop the council size. This is a chart I'm going to leave. It shows who finished in the 5th and 4th spots in the elections over the last 20 years. Two things stand out to me. Schmidt, Scharf, and Berman would not be serving on this council if in fact this law was in place. So I saw Mark's comments, and I think this is a significant matter. It would have affected you. But the other matter that's interesting is if you look at who represented us over the last 20 years in terms of our utilities, including currently Councilmember Scharf, a position that takes a lot of time, one that I rejected personally, all of those people who represented us over the last 20 years wouldn't have been on the council. They all finished in the 4th or 5th spot, and including going back before that, Mike Cobb, who represents for a long time, also finished last. So
thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to leave this in these charts.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mark Weiss, to be followed by Stephanie Munoz.
Mark Weiss, 1788 Oak Creek Drive, Palo Alto. This Saturday, September 20th, 2014 at 1 p.m., my company, Earthwise Productions, is hosting a free concert at the Lytton Plaza featuring Taylor Hobynum, Taylorhobynum, a trumpet player, cornet, and his special guest, Ben Goldberg, a Bay Area-based clarinet player. This will be jazz music and improvised, some Jimmy Joffrey, Ornette Coleman, plus works of their own. They are composers and total improvisation. Of note is that Taylor Ho Bynum is actually biking to his concert from San Francisco and then continuing on to Henry Cowell Redwoods Park near Santa Cruz Felton. He's a biking enthusiast and is biking from Vancouver, Canada to Los Angeles and playing 15 gigs along the way, doing a century each day, about 100 miles. He is in Arcata, California today, 13 days into his ride, and plays Los Angeles with Anthony Braxton Trio and LA 7 days after us. I had read of his tour and his September 19th show in SF and asked if he would route through Palo Alto to play for us. Earthwise, my company, was founded in 1994 as a spin-off of Bay Area Action Earth Day and has produced more than 200 shows in Palo Alto in 20 years. This is about the 6th or 7th event Earthwise has produced at Litton Plaza, all free, featuring nationally and internationally known performers. Citizens are invited to bike to the event, and we are hoping to induce Taylor Ho Bynum to exit Palo Alto post-concert via Bryant Street, the Ellen Fletcher Bike Boulevard, and we hope the effect will be a group ride through the 6 miles of Palo Alto bike path before he and his support team head west over the foothills toward Henry Cowell State Park. Taylor Ho Bynum, free concert at Litton Plaza this Saturday from 1 to 2. Bring your bikes. I have no idea if there will be 5 or 50 people there, but I encourage you all to attend. Our backup location might be the historic train station or the foyer of the Stanford Theater, or maybe in front of the Great Brown Mural on Bryant at University, but the vibe will start at Litton Plaza. It's a bit of an experiment for us, which fits with the music per se. It's Earthwise, which means moves like the Earth, natural system, not mechanistic, an interval, it flows. In Tay's words, I see the entire trip as a kind of composition. Like all my music, it looks to combine the predetermined, indeterminate, improvised, intuitive, and structured into an organic whole. The endeavor is an act of composition, a performance art piece, a philosophical statement, a celebration of musical community, and an exercise in extreme physicality. For me, there are clear analogies between choosing to travel by bike and choosing to pursue a career in creative music. The trip may be slower and more arduous, but it is ultimately more rewarding in its acoustic pleasures and in unexpected delights. Wow.
Thank you. Stephanie Munoz? There she is.
I think it's a lucky night that this also happens to be the night that we're honoring films on human rights, because my quick words are about development. You know that towns develop, the best people, the wealthiest people live near the center, because that's all the center there is. As the town becomes more and more and more dense, it becomes less desirable, and then poor people take their place because of density. Then the opposite way is that you, on the outskirts of town, a developer buys something that's in the path of development. Well, people do that, for instance, with storage lockers. You buy a little something out on the other side of Bayshore, and what to do with it until development comes? Well, you put in storage lockers. Back in 1926, the county of Santa Clara had a piece of raw land in the county on El Camino Real, and they decided the best thing to do with that would be put a bunch of working class people there in little tiny homes. Very good. Now, what I want to point out is human beings are not storage lockers. It is inappropriate to put human beings in a place where you intend to put somebody better. And that is what Palo Alto did when they zoned that trailer park R15. They were giving themselves flexibility, they call it. I would call it dishonesty. I would call it bad faith, because they had those people vote to come into Palo Alto, and practically the first thing they did was zone it something more important and better so that those people would have to leave. Now, We all know about starter houses. I saw an ad the other day for a little black stone house, 900 square feet, starter house. But I do not think that you can analogize and have cities have starter populations that can be discarded when the appropriate time comes. Thank you.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda is the approval of minutes for August 11th. Can I have a motion, please?
So moved. Second.
All right, let's vote on the board. And the minutes have been approved unanimously. The next item, we're going to be skipping over excuse me. No, we're not skipping anything over. I've got consent calendar first. Do we have any cards for consent calendar? There are no cards for consent calendar, so I would like to have a motion for the consent calendar.
So moved. Second.
All right, let's go ahead and vote. And that passes unanimously as well. So we're going to be moving directly to item number 11 and returning to item number 9 and 10. Item number 11 is the referral that we made last week to a
ad hoc committee.
Thank you, ad hoc committee. So on the grand jury investigation. So on our response. So last Monday we took up the response for the grand jury findings. Council asked me to create an ad hoc subcommittee to consider revisions to the city's response. I appointed council members Burton Schmidt, who has worked with the city manager and attorney on a revised response. The subcommittee would like to have council refer 4 items to Policy and Services Committee for further discussion and recommendation to full council. Item 1 is receive and review an inventory of lands donated to the city. 2, consider a potential revision to Policy and Procedures 1-48, which is the procedure for sale and transfer of surplus city-owned real property, including to add additional guidance and clarity regarding unsolicited offers to lease or purchase city land and the timing of real property closed sessions. 3, public pre-screening with council of projects requiring zone changes. And 4, receive a report on software solutions supporting responses to requests for documents under the Public Records Act to be provided to City Council by April 1st, 2015. Since the referred items are described in the revised response, we will need to take up these items first. And if there are changes to the referrals, staff will need to make conforming changes to the response. With that, I want to just see, do we have any presentation here?
We hadn't prepared one. I think your introductory remarks cover the item, and perhaps the ad hoc subcommittee members would like to make comments.
Sure. Would either one of you like to kick this off for us? Councilmember Schmidt? We do have public speakers on this, so after you kick it off, I'll go out to the public.
Well, I'll just make a couple general comments. I think the thrust of the report in front of us is a council document. I think it reflects the fact that when the grand jury talked about the city, the council is the representative body that is reflected in that and should assume responsibility for the responses. There are 2 things on the table in front of us. One is the letter itself, and the second is a series of actions recommended to be taken by the council of referring items to the Policy and Services Committee. paragraph there. The city will implement this recommendation. The council has tasked its Policy and Services Committee with reviewing city policies on sale of real policy and revising the policies to provide additional guidance and clarity. On the very top of page 5, there's a 6th item that says council has referred to its Policy and Services Committee a policy that any major zone change must come to council for a public pre-screening. And then at the end of that page in recommendation 6, there are 3 references that the city will provide additional software solutions. That's the first response to recommendation 6. Response to recommendation 7 says the city will provide software solutions, increase staff training. And again, in recommendation 7, it says the city will provide software to better track requests. And the last sentence on the page 5 says the city will provide additional training for staff who work on public records requests, and the council has directed staff to update the council on software solutions by April 1st, 2015. So there are 7 items, sentences in the letter that entail and involve a commitment by the council.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to go out for public comment on this, and our first speaker is Robert Moss, to be followed by Wayne Douglas.
Thank you, Mayor Shepherd and council members. Well, there's no question that this procedure was badly handled, and I want to specifically address your response to finding 5B, which I think is inadequate. And I complained about this, by the way, when you appropriated the $250,000 to look at the pedestrian and bike alignment between Stanford and the train station. That alignment was tweaked specifically to incorporate the 4 buildings that Arrillaga was proposing, even though he didn't have a formal proposal before the community. And saying that you had money from Stanford to do a bike and pedestrian path and therefore you went ahead and did it does not describe what actually happened. That alignment was set up specifically to accommodate the Arrillaga project. And so the city was spending $250,000 of money they could be using for other things without having a formal approval requested by Arrillaga. Mr. Arrillaga is one of the 50 wealthiest people in the world. He earns $250,000 in less than a week. We certainly could have let him spend the money to look at the alignment, and we didn't. So I don't think you've properly addressed this issue. Second address, talking about the meeting on September 24th, where you again talked about doing the alignment and looking at the procedure of the process, again inadequately addresses the failure to comply with normal procedures. Now, in the grand jury report, it mentions that the city manager told you that Arrillaga would be speaking to 3 council members at a time about the project at 27 University. If he did that with 2 groups of 3, then he had discussed in private a proposed development with a majority of the council, which was not revealed to the public. My understanding is that it violated the Brown Act, but there's no mention of that, and there's no mention in the report, in the reply, as to whether or not the Brown Act was in fact violated, and if not, to provide evidence. And I think it's important that the community know whether or not the council was in violation of the state law, if you were aware that you were in violation, and how it can be corrected. This was a very badly handled operation, and I certainly hope you've all learned from it and it never ever happens again.
Wayne Douglas, to be followed by Stephanie Munoz.
Thank you, Council. In a bit of shameless self-promotion, I'll mention that I'm running for council, which is one of the reasons why I'm speaking tonight. And my first thing to say is, what the hell were you thinking? I mean, when you think about it, everybody rushed blindly into this secret meeting. Some of you have expressed regret that if you had any kind of regrets, that you didn't express them as vociferously as possible. The excuses are pathetic. I mean, pathetic. The best one, though, and the one I have to say, and I'm not singling you out. Well, yes, I am, Ms. Mayor. It never happened. I don't remember it, you know. I mean, I would say if that's the case, then you should see a doctor. You may have had a stroke or something, because how can you not remember something like this? Anyway, but what amazes me is that you all went into it, and now you're all backing out of it in as good a way as you can figure out how to do. None of you have done it particularly well, but the result, at least for somebody like me, is that you have made the issue of incumbency not an issue in this election. Nobody in his right mind would claim incumbency to run for re-election when you've got a record like the one that we have here. So that's the reason why I'm here, more to express outrage. I'm sure there'll be more before this evening is out. I'm at a loss to explain any of it. I have racked my brain for precedents of one kind or another. And the one that comes up to mind is from my childhood, when my father read me the funny papers in the Sunday paper when I was a child. He used to read it if I was good in church in front of me. And there was one comic strip at the time, Mandrake the Magician. Does anybody remember Mandrake the Magician? The man who didn't have a special power that I can remember, like super strength or flying or something like that. He could only had the power to cloud men's minds. So assuming that we're speaking both about men and women here, somehow, somebody, maybe Mr. Arriaga himself, I don't know, clouded your minds. And that led to this insane thing that you went on to. So beyond expressing that, I don't have much to say, except that, well, okay.
Thank you. Stephanie Munoz, your final speaker.
Well, those are kind of harsh words, but you got some way back in January. People just objected to the whole Arriaga 27 University affair and claimed that all kinds of things. And I hope you take to heart what Herb said. I won't repeat it. What I would like you to do is to extend what I hope you've learned from this sad incident to other aspects. For instance, and I do have some sympathy for you, because the way I see it, the Brown Act leads you to believe that you can get away with all kinds of not really understood deals. And for instance, way back in Maybell, we never did find out how much the developer was going to give for his share of the 4 acres. Never. The post office. Last word I ever heard about the post office from this dais was, we don't want to tip our hand, and other private companies might be in competition. And it seemed to me if you had a true discussion of it, it might be kind of embarrassing because a bunch of people would say, you know, you could put the homeless in it, and according to the protocols of the giving away of government federal property, you could probably have it for nothing if you put the homeless in it. And I personally don't think that you really want to have the homeless in the post office when you're paying for office space right downtown. You could use it for office space, but you could swap for some other place and put the homeless there. Anyway, it does seem to me that you ought to take the public a little more into your confidence in this, even if the Brown Act doesn't really require you to do it. So that's my wish for your. I hope it could be a learning experience, and things could be better, right? Yeah, right. Okay. Good luck.
Thank you. Now it comes back to council. And we're going to need to have a motion to take on the items over to Policy and Services first. Councilmember Schmid, do you want to organize us here?
Make a motion that the council refer to Policy and Services Committee the 4 items listed: receive and review an inventory of lands donated to the city, consider potential revisions to Policy and Procedures 148, including to add additional guidance and clarity regarding unsolicited offers to lease or purchase city land and the timing of real property closed sessions. C, public pre-screening with council of projects requiring zone change. And D, receive a report on software solutions supporting responses to requests for documents under the Public Records Act to be provided by April 1st, 2015.
Second.
Would you like to speak any further to your motion?
Oh, I would just say I think these are items that were suggested by more than one council member in the open session and have been integrated into the response. It does show clearly council responsibility for doing something on its procedures and policies that would deal with some of the issues brought up. And I think, tries to address the concrete issues brought up by the grand jury.
All right. Councilmember Price, would you like to speak to your second?
I agree with everything stated. Policy and Services is looking forward to addressing these items as they come forward to us. And I hope most of them are done in 2014.
Councilmember Burt.
Yes, well, I just want to make sure that the council takes full opportunity to review and comment on the work that Councilmember Schmidt and I attempted to, or did in attempting to capture both the words and the intent expressed by our colleagues last Monday. And we have both these 4 items that are specific referrals to Policy and Services Committee, and then the additional red line language that we wanted to make sure was very clear as to the exact changes that we're recommending. But ultimately,
we're just taking up the referral items right now. I thought that we want to make sure that there's no changes because then there's language changes.
I'll just wrap it up as a comment that will cover both. And ultimately, the council tonight needs to review this carefully and be assured that both the referral items and the redlining reflect language that they will stand behind. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Holman.
Yeah, I'm just asking for a little clarification on these items. I support the motion, but for instance, on number 2 or B that is here, does that include looking at how property is, the process for how property is determined to be surplus? I'd just like a little clarification on that. And if this language isn't clear enough, maybe we could determine some language.
So Mayor Shepherd, maybe I can speak to that. I think it was the intention of the ad hoc subcommittee that that referral be broad and that it encompass the whole topic of 1-48, whatever items the committee felt were appropriate to raise in terms of updating and broadening and clarifying that policy.
So I would just confirm that the language is including the delineated items, but not limited to.
Okay. And then if perhaps City Attorney could remind me, well, no, it wouldn't be an I-48. One of the comments that I had made, because it was one of the places we got in trouble here, was to review the procedures for policy and service, review the procedures for city manager authority to lease city-owned land. And that isn't listed here.
That's correct. It's not listed here, and the council tonight could add that in a referral to policy and services if you wanted to do that. That is policy 1-11.
1-11?
Yes, and that was another one of the policies and procedures that were mentioned by the grand jury.
I would offer an amendment. I would offer an amendment to add that one.
Let's see if it makes the, does the maker accept the amendment? And the language would be?
What was the added amendment?
For policy and service to review the process and authority of city manager to, any city manager, to lease city-owned land and facilities.
Okay, I'd be happy to accept that if the seconder does.
Councilmember Price. Okay, that's been accepted.
Okay, thank you for that. Appreciate it. And one other question is under A, it says receive and review an inventory of lands donated to the city. Is the intention for that to come? Well, I guess policy and services will review this, whether it's coming as an info item or as an action item, or will that be what the policy and services committee will be taking up? How that comes to the council? Is that the intention?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Good. Thank you for that clarification. And I think that covers my comments on those referrals. Thank you. And just want to state I really appreciate the work of the subcommittee.
Councilmember Sharp.
I also like to say I appreciate the work of the subcommittee, and I think you've captured most of it. The one thing I don't think we've captured is I think we should have a
Can you speak into your mic?
Sure. I think we should have a vote before we go into closed session so that it's a conscious decision. Once you're in closed session, it's really hard to get out of closed session. It's hard to have that discussion. I think all of us would like to have a sense of what we're going into closed session for and then make it a conscious decision. So I would add a referral to policy and services that we look at it, changing our policies, that we first meet and then make a conscious vote to go into closed session.
Councilmember Schmidt.
If you're referring to property decisions, I would agree with that.
I actually referring to everything.
To every closed session.
I think there's no harm in, there are so many different times that we go into closed session that it may not be necessary in all of those. There may be litigation reasons you go into it, but sometimes there may not. Sometimes you may want to, first of all, have a discussion about why you're going into litigation, bring the community along, and then you may decide to then go into closed session. But there's a lot of stuff we talk about that could be open to the public. And I think having a conscious decision makes it everyone's mind about whether or not you should or not. And we'll let, those are the kind of issues we can discuss at policy and services.
Can I ask point of order? That? Point of order. My question is for City Attorney. It's not that I disagree, but does that go beyond the scope of what we can actually address tonight, since the breadth of the comment or the amendment is what it is?
So this part of the council's discussion is really in the nature of making a referral and setting an agenda for future discussion. So it's fine for the council to broaden it. You're not making that decision tonight to change your procedure. The proposal is to ask policy and services to look at that. So that is something you can do tonight.
Thank you for the clarification.
Do you want to accept that as an amendment?
I would accept that, yeah.
Councilmember Price?
I have a question. Are you suggesting this is for every single instance prior to going into closed session, we would have some deliberation here to make that determination? Is that what you're saying?
It would be sent to
My
policy.
suggestion is it goes
Go
to
to
Policy and Services,
Services.
and Policy and Services makes that decision. But I want it to be broad enough that Policy and Services could make that determination to do that or something more limited.
But the issue is that prior to making any decisions regarding agenda items for closed session, that's what you're suggesting?
That's what I'm suggesting. And maybe we need to reflect that in the language so it's not so specific to Policy and Services.
Okay.
And I think the answer, Councilmember Byrd, is correct, whether to go into closed session. Correct.
Okay, thank you. All right, I agree.
Okay, so that's been accepted as an amendment. I see no more lights.
So why don't you just give them the language, because you're correct.
Okay.
If it's all right if I offer.
Yes, go ahead. I'm sorry.
So to change it to refer to Policy and Services to discuss whether to have a council vote prior to going into closed session.
Okay, is that anything further?
Nope, that's it.
Okay. Since I see no lights, I'm going to ask a question of the, okay, Councilmember Price.
I'm sorry about this. This is making it sound like we're going to make a decision on the spot if we're going to go into closed session or not. The issue is, it's regarding the agenda for the closed session and a determination that it's appropriate for us to agendize an item for closed session. Is that not correct?
That's not correct. The answer is we would sit here, but the item would have been agendized by staff, as it always is. Take what happened on the 7.7 acres. We would have sat here. There would have been an introduction about staff, about what we're going into closed session for. We could have thought about it and said, no, we don't think it's appropriate to go into closed session. In fact,
Got
these
it.
issues...
So it's on the spot. Got it.
That's correct.
Okay, first off, thank you very much for that latest amendment to this, because I have discussed with the city attorney that this is how San Francisco operates. They have an ordinance. I started doing it with Coverly to actually vote to go into closed session on Coverly, so we did notice it twice, because I felt that there were times that we need to bring the community along, that we don't need to have everything behind closed doors. So I'm glad that Policy and Services will be taking that up. I wanted to ask the subcommittee just a question, because part of the confusion over how this rolled out was because there was also a significant gift going to possibly the city by the intermodal station being redone and the theater being built. Was there any consideration at the subcommittee level to possibly send to Policy and Services some kind of discussion as to how we look at our gifting policy when somebody wants to do a significant and major gift? Was that troubling at all between? No?
No, and we only took up the guidance that we received from our colleagues last Monday.
Okay.
And that was the scope of what we were to consider.
Okay. Because I do think that that's sort of a confusing area of when a multi-million-dollar gift, significant gift comes into the city. I don't know if we really have a structure for that, for figuring out how to talk about it. And I do know that that was part of, well, it was a lot of the conversation on this. And so I just wanted to see if, because I know I mentioned it last Monday and I wasn't sure how I mentioned it as to whether or not we should consider it in some follow-up here. But I would like council members to think about that, because there needs to be some kind of mechanism and trigger that allows somebody to safely be able to talk to the city manager, and the city manager have a process for bringing forward things either sooner or later to full council in some way. And I don't know what our gifting policy looks like right now. And that's something that is confusing to me. And this was part of the conversation as to how we ended up with trying to figure out whether this was something we wanted to bring forward for an advisory vote for the community in order to move forward on this. So with that, Councilmember Schmid, you want to do another comment and then we can go to a vote?
Yeah, just a question. Maybe it's a question for the city attorney. On response to recommendation 3, there's the wording that the council directed that all real property closed session agendas include sufficient user-friendly description of a subject property so the public can identify and locate that property. Do we need to include this in the referral to policy and services?
So it's my understanding in discussions with the city manager that both the city manager and I felt that that was a clear enough and straightforward enough instruction from the whole council that we could simply implement that. We could do additional work on the agenda to ensure that in a case where, for example, there may not be a street address, there are other tools available so that the public is fully aware of exactly what piece of real property is the subject of it.
Okay, and I think that is also taken care of by Councilmember Scharf's amendment. Thank you.
Okay, with that, we're going to go ahead and vote on adding these 6 items now to policy and services to take up for a follow-up on the grand jury report. Let's go ahead and vote.
5 or 6?
I think there's 4 and then 2 more, so 6. The added ones are that we look at policy 1-11, and the other one is the closed session, in addition to the 4 that you and Councilmember Schmid called out. Oh, let me vote. So, and that passes unanimously. Now we're going to return to the actual adjustment in language. Councilmember Klein?
Excuse me. I just want to say that I really think that the Councilmember Burton Schmid did an excellent job on this. I think it became a much clearer, more sharply focused, more well-reasoned document, and I really appreciate their work. And I'll be glad to move the... I don't think it's appropriate that I make a motion because I'm going to recuse myself for items dealing with 27 University. But
well, I think we all could do that with item number 1, which is from 1996 to 2005. None of us were on council then. So.
Well, that may be fine, but the council takes responsibility for those. And since anyway, we've talked about that before. I'll still make the motion so we can move things forward.
Thank you. Would you like to speak to your motion? Okay. Councilmember Burt,
I'll thank them again. They did a great job.
Okay. Councilmember Burt, would you like to speak to your motion? To your second.
Well, as an overview, I would say that we did attempt to provide greater clarity and responsibility for both the council and the city actions in these areas. I think I would like to ask the city attorney to respond to Mr. Moss's concern over not whether we had a failure in process, but whether there was a Brown Act violation in the way that the city manager conducted the interviews or I shouldn't say interviews, did the informational reports to the council members. And I don't think there's a dispute that we had a significant failure in our process.
Thank you, Councilmember Burt. I appreciate the invitation because this is a common area of confusion. And so I think it is important to focus on this for members of the community. The Brown Act applies to the council. It does not apply to the staff or private citizens or community organizations. it happens all the time that private citizens or community organizations may meet with individual council members, may meet with all 9 council members. That is not a Brown Act violation. And the courts have been very clear that the staff can also do that. They can provide informational briefings to individual council members or even small groups, even to the point of communicating with the whole council. What cannot be done is to use those third parties to communicate between council members, to carry a message, the way middle schoolers might say, I talked to Jane and she said that Jose said, right? Then if you're doing that and you're connecting council members to each other to the point of 5, that's what's called a serial meeting in the Brown Act. So it's a subtle point, and it's a point of common confusion. The grand jury here did not state that there was a Brown Act violation, and that's because there was not.
And then second, I think it's good that we review the city manager lease procedures, but as we reviewed the document, and the proposed changes, one of the things that became apparent to us is that there was not so much a shortcoming in the procedures from the prior city managers as a shortcoming in following the procedures. But we may see that it's still valuable to look at upgrading those procedures, so I think that's a healthy thing to do. Then finally, on this issue of gifts, even though it wasn't accepted in the prior motion, I think it's important for us to recognize that this project had a potential public benefit, but I don't think it's fair to call it a gift. It was a potential public benefit in exchange for a major zoning change, not technically a PC, but it had all the characteristics of a major PC. And that's different from a true gift, which doesn't look for something in exchange. So it may yet be appropriate for us to look at gifting procedures, but I don't think that this particular issue and scenario triggers that.
Councilmember Berman.
So I just want to briefly speak to to second everything that Councilmember Klein said, and thanking Councilmembers Burt and Schmidt and the work that they did. I think that the improvements that you made to our response make the document a much better document. And I didn't find it necessary to speak at the last item, but I think the policy areas that we're sending the policy and services for review are very appropriate and will hopefully make our processes better if anything similar to this ever comes up again. So thank you, guys.
Vice Mayor Ness.
And I would certainly reiterate what Councilmember Berman just said. Thank you. I know you all spent a considerable amount of time on this. So I want to just clarify one thing, and I did talk with some of the staff about this, because neither Councilmember Burt nor I were here, and because I had Berman, sorry. I had a question from a constituent who asked why we were involved in this in particular. And so overall, I would comment that these are generally very good guidelines and ones that we should follow all of the time. And so the 3 of us will be voting on this because it will apply to us in the future, regardless of what has happened in the past. And I know Councilmember Klein was also in this somewhat awkward position. Surprisingly, in full disclosure, I probably was the only one who sat here in 1996. So, and I must say I remember very little about it, but I think a very good job, and I think it's more than appropriate that this go to Policy and Services, and I hope they wind it all up by the end of December, Gail, and deliver it back. So thanks especially to you who spent all that extra time on it, and both Jim and Molly oversaw that, I know.
Councilmember Holman.
Yes, thank you, and repeated thank you to Councilmembers Schmidt and Burt. I think you did a really remarkable job in a very short period of time. There aren't page numbers on the red line version, but it's the top of page I guess top of page 2, response to finding 3 in the 1, 2, third large paragraph. I'm wanting to make sure that something there is accurate. So in the middle of the paragraph it says he, meaning Arriaga, was the neighboring landowner and between 1983 and 1996 had control of the property because the Lees had sold him the estate that they had reserved on the Lee parcel, including the exclusive right of access. So I know they gave him the exclusive right of access, but is it accurate to say they had sold him the estate? I'm not sure that's accurate.
Yes, it is accurate.
It is
correct.
Okay, all right. I didn't think he had actual control of or ownership of the property, and that seems to indicate that he did.
So at that time, the city had the underlying fee ownership of the property, but no right to access or control the property. So this is another confusing point. This is law school property law 101. You can split apart the aspects of ownership of property, and the city did have the underlying ownership, but no access or control. The Lees retained that, and they sold it to John Arriaga. So Arriaga had it for a period of time.
Even.
Can I clarify something?
Sure.
We may be talking about two different things. With the property is the estate that John Arriaga owns adjacent to this, and that's what he acquired from the Lees, and in doing so, also acquired the access rights for this period of time.
Yes, and that makes more sense.
The term, as it's used here, estate, means that more limited type of ownership of the 7.7 acres itself. The Lees had retained that even when they deeded over the underlying fee ownership to the city. They retained what's called an estate, which is a right of current access and control. That's correct. So it's very confusing.
It's not my area of expertise, that's for sure. And then a question that gets into a detail here in the next paragraph, about in the middle, with the line starting anticipating the need to provide information to the council, staff ordered an appraisal of the property, which was completed in May 2012, came in $175,000. I guess the question is, if the, and maybe this is something that should have been referred to policy and services, I'm not sure. I would imagine that the authority to order that appraisal is certainly under the city manager's ability, but I guess.
Absolutely. So
yeah,
the cost of the appraisal itself is not very great, and of course the city council has wisely delegated small contract services contract authority to the city manager. So this happens all the time that we have property appraised at the staff level.
I have no issue with that. Is it typical that without council direction that staff gets property appraisals done?
It can happen from time to time, and I think that's one of the great points of discussion that we need to have with the policy and services, because we don't have formalized procedures when somebody's approaching us about a property. It doesn't happen often. It's a handful of times since I've been director that we've done it, but we have done it under the city manager's authority.
Well, and is it not also the case that getting an appraisal doesn't necessarily mean that a property is contemplated for sale? There could be a variety of reasons that the city wants to understand the value of a piece of real property.
Thank you for setting that up. So one way that we do it is to set the rents for the properties. We want to get an update to the value of the property so we can set the proper rent rates. So we would do that under the authority of the city manager.
Okay. All right. I'm good with that. And I'm not questioning the authority. You can understand that. On the bottom of the next page, under recommendation 5, response.
5?
Yes, pages. Recommendation 5.
2 pages over?
It would be 2 pages over, yes. Recommendation 5 at the bottom. It says early input from constituents is critically important, and then it goes on. While concrete planning concepts sometimes require preparation in order for the public to have significant substantive material to react to. So my trouble here is with significant substantive. I'm more comfortable with words like informed or meaningful, because if it's significant and substantive, it sounds like plans are going to be pretty well vetted and honed before the public sees it. So
That's my concern. So I would ask for an amendment to have significant substantive be replaced with the word informed. That was for Councilmember Klein as maker of the motion.
I hear you, but I think that wording I think that question ought to be referred to Councilmembers Schmidt and Burt, the authors here.
All right. So is it clear what my concern is? Significant and substantive look like pretty developed plans before it comes to council.
I think that's probably better wording, informed.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. Okay, thank you for that. Then on the top of the next page, again, recommendation 5 response. It talks about, and thank you for including this, the council has referred to Policy and Services Committee a proposed policy that any major zone change must come to the council for public pre-screening. I had mentioned also comp plan amendments. And I don't know if that was an oversight or if that had been intentionally left off.
I think it was not in our notes and not discussed. And if it was brought up at the meeting last Monday, then it would be appropriate. We would consider it. And I think it would be...
It should say comp plan change. That was what was in my notes from the last meeting.
So it would be a comp plan change would get a pre-screening. Any, major... Now, we have some minor comp plan changes, is that correct? Can the city attorney or Director Gettleman refer to that?
I guess, what's a minor comp plan?
It's my understanding that there are sometimes relatively minor conforming comp plan amendments to a project that would be going through a process of going to ARB and the PTC, et cetera.
So I would be fine, it's really the maker, well, I guess it's being referred to us again. I would be fine with that also under the same qualifier. It's major comp plan changes as well as major zone changes.
And we'll leave it to Policy and Services to define what major means. Okay, thank you for that.
Okay, great. So, Councilmember Klein, yes. You deferred us, but thank you. But.
Okay, and the last one is just a little bit of clarifying language. Going back, apologies to finding 5A and the response. At the end of that, the last sentence says, the city's efforts were directed toward shaping the proposed concept into an improved design in order for the public to have a concrete concept on which to comment. I think it really responds more clearly to the grand jury if there's another sentence added. There's something like, nevertheless, the need for can't read my own notes here. The need for public meetings should have been followed. Or appropriate public meeting. We
were trying to avoid this.
Appropriate public meeting.
Well, maybe. What if it was earlier public meetings, or public meetings earlier in the process?
Were warranted or something of that
warranted.
nature. Yeah.
Councilmember Klein? Do you agree?
Well, I'll go along, but I really would urge Councilmember Holman to end this. We've appointed the writing committee to avoid just what we're going through right now.
And this is my last one, and I think the others have just picked up things that we talked about last week. So has City Clerk got that one? nevertheless, public meetings should have occurred earlier in the process. Still need the word nevertheless after 5A add. After add. Nevertheless, comma.
Quotation of the nevertheless. Okay. And all the balance. That's what she's saying.
Yes. Should have occurred earlier in the process.
Nevertheless is one word.
Is it really?
Yeah.
I probably always do the spell check.
So is this is it for you? Okay, Councilmember Schmid, you have comments?
Yeah, I thought Councilmember Burt brought up a important point about the Brown Act. I also note that Mr. Borak wrote a letter in which he had a citation of the Brown Act and a quote from the Attorney General saying that it should be used in certain ways. Now, I know the Brown Act was not brought up by the grand jury, but we do have a session, I believe, on Thursday about the Brown Act. Seems to me, since this has been a public discussion, it might be appropriate to address some of those issues during that meeting.
Thank you, Councilmember Schmid. We do make it a point. We do this training annually. This will be the third one. And we do spend quite a bit of time on serial meetings because it is an area that's complex for board and commission members to comply with and also sometimes difficult for the public to understand.
There's a lot of gray areas in there, and it's good to just have a public discussion. I also noted that Mr. Borak said that the final approval of the 7.7 as dedicated parkland was September 8th, not. I don't know whether we need to make that.
It is technically true that an ordinance is finally adopted 30 days, or it's finally adopted on the second reading and is effective 30 days later. We were making a more general statement to the grand jury, and I think for the informational purposes of a grand jury response, that's probably sufficient.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and I just had a couple quick questions, because I have found some misunderstandings in the community that I was clarifying, and that is the grand jury has released this report and they have disbanded. So, and I agree with my colleagues that this is a better product than it was last week. I feel much more comfortable with sending this back. But will there be a response from somebody, and if so, how? Or do they digest this and update their report? Or what happens to this that we're sending off now?
So the civil grand jury process is an informational process. It's a group of citizens appointed to look into the operations of cities and counties in which they're located, and they work under the supervision of the court. When they publish their report, they're really at the end of their term, and this grand jury panel, like all others that we get these reports in the May-June timeframe, it has essentially disbanded by the time we get the report. And so we are required by state statute to consider and respond to each finding and recommendation. And that document goes back to the county court and it is filed.
Okay.
And so this is the end of this process.
Okay, so we won't be revisiting this except in our own policy and services with our own directions. Okay, and then I did want to clear something up that was said at public comment. I met with Mr. Arriaga just myself, and I don't think I think all of us did. We were asked to meet individually with him, and that I don't remember deliberating at the informational meetings, which I think is the clear delineation between whether or not we're doing something wrong. And I was becoming informed. This was quite confusing all the way through for me included because of just the presentation all the way along. And so it was sort of an on again, off again project a little bit. And so I just would like to apologize myself for not being able to figure out how to bring more clarity as to what was going on. But I do know that Theater Works was involved, and there was a lot of energy at multiple levels that could have been much more transparent, I think. But it was also a moving ball with an awful lot of things going on at that time at council. So with that, I think we've concluded everything here, and we can vote on sending this off. And we'll wait for Councilmember Price to get back to vote. And it is unanimous. Thank you very much.
Clerk, would you please note that I was not participating in anything doing with number 5, the finding, the response, or the recommendations. Thank you.
And let's move on to our next agenda item, which is the enforcement of water during a dry year. On August 4th, Council adopted a resolution implementing outdoor water use restrictions in compliance with the State Water Resource Board Control Board emergency regulations, finding a drought emergency in California. Tonight we're taking up tools to encourage responsible management of the city's water resources and establish the enforcement process. After the report, I will be asking for a motion to adopt Resolution Attachment A, establishing the enforcement process for violators. And Val, you are in charge of this from Utilities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mayor Shepard. Valerie Fong, Utilities Director, and I have with me Senior Resource Planner Nico Prokos, and he'll give you an overview of these proposed enforcements.
Thank you, Val. Good evening, Mayor Shepard and council members. I have a very brief presentation here for you tonight, and the agenda is, as you see it in front of you, we're going to go over the water supply update. We're going to give you an update on Palo Alto's drought response. We're going to talk a little bit about the mandatory water use restrictions. Again, we're going to go into the proposed enforcement program, then we're going to get into the next steps in the recommendation. In terms of water supply updates, most of you are aware that we receive 100% of our water from the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission regional water system. In the January to February 2014 timeframe, there was a lot going on. The governor called for a 20% statewide water use reduction. San Francisco requested a 10% voluntary water use reduction, and the Santa Clara Valley Water District called for a 20% reduction. And although we don't receive any supplies from the Santa Clara Valley Water District, we are in the county and we are in technically in their service area, so we definitely pay attention to their water situation as well. From the April to August timeframe, following the authorization from the governor, so the governor was not very happy with the response to the 20% statewide call. The State Water Resources Control Board adopted emergency water use restrictions. Also in that time frame, and continuing today, the San Francisco PUC has their request for a voluntary 10% reduction. This chart sums up the water use situation on the regional water system. So this includes both the retail customers of San Francisco and the wholesale customers. And there's a lot going on here, but I think the important point is that dotted line represents a 10% reduction target. The red line is measures the 2014, so the current year water deliveries. And the main takeaway here is starting around June, end of June, we start to see some significant water use reductions occurring on the system. So the messaging is starting to get through. People are aware that there's a drought going on, and they're really responding. And so that's a good sign to see, and definitely I have some other charts further on where you'll be able to get a better sense of that, also how it relates to Palo Alto. So in terms of Palo Alto's drought response, we have stepped up our water conservation, communications, and other programs. We've increased our rebate programs in coordination with the Santa Clara Valley Water District. We do have some new water efficiency programs that we've rolled out, and we have 2 grants in partnership with the Santa Clara Valley Water District for innovative conservation programs. And we're very happy to report that Palo Altans are successfully conserving. They've exceeded the 10% water reduction goal to date. They've reduced water use by 13% compared to 2013, and that's for the February through July time period. And city facilities are also doing their part. City operations have reduced water use for February through June by 25%, which is quite impressive, and we're actually compiling, getting more current data, so we'll hopefully be able to report back on that soon to make sure that things are still on track. Now, in terms of the cumulative water use reduction for the city of Palo Alto, this chart tells the story here. And the blue line is the 2013 usage, so the prior year. The red line is the current year, 2014. And the large dotted line represents a 10% reduction from 2013. And the small dotted line represents a 20% reduction. So you can see up through July, we're about 13.1%, which is above what San Francisco's call for a 10% voluntary reduction. So we're doing quite well so far. I mean, obviously we have to keep things going, but we're getting a good response from our customers. Now you'll recall that we brought a staff report to you about a month ago, and it provided some of the detail, which I'm just going to briefly touch on right now, regarding the action that was taken by the state. On July 15th, the State Board adopted emergency water use regulations. I'm not going to really go into a bunch of detail on this because this was mentioned in the previous staff report, but you can see there's kind of two categories. There's statewide prohibitions for individuals, and there's 4 of those prohibitions, and those are all subject to a fine of up to $500 a day. And then in the second category, which applied to urban water supplier, and that includes us, we had to implement mandatory irrigation prohibitions from our urban water management plan, from the water shortage contingency plan. So just to refresh your memory, urban water management plans are approved on a 5-year cycle. The last one was approved in June 2011. And then we've initiated monthly reporting to the State Water Board on our water use. Continuing with Palo Alto's response, I mentioned this previously, but I'll mention it again. On August 4th, the Council adopted a resolution that adopted the 2 new water use restrictions from the State Board, and initiated the irrigation restriction from the 2010 Urban Water Management Plan. And I want to back up a little bit that the State Board had 4 restrictions. We already have some water use restrictions in the Muni Code, so 2 of those were already kind of covered. So we were really just adopting 2 of the new ones and the outdoor irrigation prohibition. Now, since then, and before that, we've been tracking violations. We have, it says plus 40 there. Actually, I checked this morning, and we're actually approaching closer to 50. We have an interdepartmental drought team, which is convening monthly for coordination purposes. We're really focusing, like a lot of water agencies, on education. We think that most people want to do the right thing, and we want to give them an opportunity to do the right thing and to respond. And we're in the process of hiring a water waste coordinator. Now, in terms of the enforcement program, we are currently following, in the first bullet there, that's the process to respond to violations. So the first and second violation, we contact the customer either through door hangers or through emails, or we even give them a call. When you get into the third violation, which is step 3, we're moving towards a certified letter from the utilities director, and that letter will contain, will reference probably the 2 prior notifications and most likely the potential penalties or fines that someone could face if they don't comply. And then finally, in step 4, you get into the arena of potential fines. Now, I do want to emphasize again that we really are not anticipating at this time that it's going to be necessary to impose fines, but we do need the authority to do so just in case. We do have several mechanisms to impose fines for violations of water use restrictions in the Muni Code, and that was a table in the staff report that went into great detail about some of those mechanisms, and we can certainly answer questions about those tonight if you have any. And the recommendation today proposes to make the two added State Water Resources Control Board violations and the outdoor water use restriction subject to a $100 fine. So in terms of next steps, we're going to continue what we're doing right now with increased customer outreach and conservation incentives and education with our customers. Again, the issuance of fines is not something that we're contemplating right now. We've seen some great response, so we're really happy with that. We do have the drought team, which is meeting monthly, and we're involving all the different departments. We're trying to figure out ways where everyone can participate, can respond, and get ideas from the different departments. But we're also getting together just in case the drought does persist. So if we have another bad year, we want to be able to hit the ground running and not have to put all this together in later on down the year. We're also going to focus on completing the recycled water EIR, and our goal right now is to bring that to council in spring 2015. And of course, we're going to continue with our monthly reporting to the State Water Resources Control Board. So this is the recommendation before you tonight, and I guess at that point we'll open it up to any questions you might have.
Okay, thank you. I have one speaker on this item, and that is Rita Burrell, and you will have 3 minutes.
Thank you. I live at 1125 Channing Avenue, and I walk my dogs in the Crescent Park area every night. What I'm seeing in Palo Alto is two responses to the drought. One seems to be brown lawns and conservation. The other seems to be green lawns, green parkway strips, water in the gutters, water on the cement, and pretty much a disregard for water conservation. I know that the gentleman just said that Palo Alto has reduced their water significantly. I've gone from 7 cubic feet or yards to 3. I'm very proud of that. I've made incredible changes in the way I use water. And I'm actually really outraged that people continue to have disregard for the way that they happen to be using water. We know that Palo Alto is a very well-to-do area, and I actually think that a fine of $100 the fourth time around is ludicrous. What I would propose are the following. One, I think that there needs to be a phone number where people can call and report water users. I don't know if that exists yet. If it does, I apologize for not knowing that. But I actually think it should be on every utility bill that is sent out until this drought is over. I also think that the new guidelines do not include some of the most egregious use of water, which is to water your lawn more than 2 times a week. It's been well shown that most people water their lawn 3 times or more a week and provide more than 50% water than the lawn actually uses. There is considerable overspraying or overwatering of lawn in that the water does not go to the lawn but goes to the walkway, the cement parkway, or other areas besides the lawn itself. This is all wasted water. The third thing is that when the state of California came out with their suggestions earlier in the year, they had said that if everyone just stopped watering lawn in the parkway, that would save 15%. I think that no lawn should be watered in the parkway. It's not used by anybody. It's mowed and grows and watered and cut. I think the other thing is a $500 fine would be great. I think the idea of hiring a water cop is great. I think the fines could be used to pay the water cop. I think if there's a $500 fine, the offender should have 2 weeks to remedy the situation. If they remedy the situation, then half of the fine should be given back to them. That would more than pay for any repairs to their sprinkler system. Otherwise, I think after $500 every week they should be contacted and the fine should just go up. I think people need to change their attitudes. It's not whether you can afford it or not. It is a community resource. Once it's gone, it's gone. Thank you.
Thank you. Colleagues, we have attachment A, which is the request that they're making tonight that we adopt. But they have spelled out in the presentation what this illustrates that we'll be doing. The door knockers 2 times, certified letter, and then finally a $100 fine. So if anybody would like to kick.
I would move approval of the staff recommendation. Adopt the resolution establishing the enforcement process for violations of the outdoor water use restrictions and adopted by Council August 4th.
All right. Would you like to speak to your motion, Vice Mayor Ness?
No, I appreciate it. I think staff did a terrific job of presenting this. I actually think Palo Alto has done a very good job, but I'm very sympathetic to the person in the audience. And that might be the only thing. It's always difficult to be a whistleblower. And I think people get uncomfortable with that, but at the same time, I think it would be very helpful to have a phone number that you could call. And the so-called water cop can at least check on that, see what's going on, and validate or even do some education while they're there. So it's a difficult time. It doesn't look like we're coming to the end of this anytime soon. And I think it's very important that we do the absolute best we can in that area of conservation.
Can you clarify if there is a phone number that we can call?
Yes, there is, and certainly our customer service line is open, and we are tracking all the calls that we do get. People also call over to our water, gas, wastewater operations area, and they are likewise logging it. And I just want to point out that the fine that we're proposing is $100 per day per infraction. So it adds up every day.
Councilmember Sharp.
I'm reminded also that we're working with our IT department on an app, a 311 app, where people can actually just use their phones and notify us, and we'll follow up.
That would be even better.
Councilmember Scharf, would you like to speak to your second?
Sure. I just want to say thank you for bringing us forward. I think it's timely. I think you guys have done a good job in thinking it through. I was glad to see that when we raised the phone number issue, not only did you have the phone number, you had the app. I think you seemed really on top of it, and I feel comfortable that it's in good hands and going forward.
Councilmember Holman?
Yes, thank you for bringing this forward. And my question is, I'm a little on the fence about something here, because we've only had the resolution in place for, or these new standards in place for barely more than a month. I thought I had read someplace else that Palo Alto had reduced its water usage by 17%. You said in the presentation it was 13%. Am I wrong? Have I not read anywhere 17%?
That's an excellent question. And the previous, when the item came to you last month, there was an update on the drought situation, and it would have showed that it was a 17% drop. That was for the previous month. The current month, there's a little bit of a change. However, a big part of that is we're having some metering issues with San Francisco, and we're anticipating that in the next month, when we go through that, that's actually going to go up. I don't think it's going to go back up to the 17 that you saw the previous month, but I think it'll go up, 14 to 16 range or somewhere in there. So it should return back to normal. We do have metering issues, timing when they read the meters. Sometimes there's metering problems. These come up all the time, and so sometimes it's just that's the explanation.
So my hesitancy is about the staffing, because Palo Altans always respond so well to, those of us who've been here for a while have lived through a couple of droughts, and we always respond very, very well. Like I said, this has only been in place for a little bit more than a month, so I'm not sure the education is even out there yet in a well-founded way. So with all due respect to the speaker, because I support your principles in what you were saying, wherever you are, there you are, principles in what you were saying, but I think it seems premature to hire a $29,000 enforcement person at this time. It may become obvious and necessary in, a couple of months, but I also remind us that we have what are they called? The ones that show our energy use. They don't count water though, do they?
The home water, we have both home water and home energy reports. Those?
Yes. Yeah, we get that too. So it helps people track what they're doing and what they're using, and it tracks them with neighbors and neighbors that are doing a good job in conserving. So I'm supportive of this, but like I said, I don't think right now I'm in favor of the $29,000 staff hire. And one comment I would make about that is that hire is kind of buried in the staff report. It's on page 4, and it's in a 4-line paragraph under resource impact, and it's not even referenced in the resolution that I can find. So it's a little hidden. So I'm not sure that's our best staff report effort in that regard.
Okay, we apologize for that, Councilmember Holman. I think this is a brand new program for us, and we're beginning to get ourselves off the ground. We've pretty much dropped everything else to deal with this program. Because it's a new program that, and we didn't know when the state was going to issue its requirements, its mandates, we are asking for an additional part-time hourly resource, probably somebody who will work part-time for the rest of the year, or maybe even into next year, to help us maintain the program, which is, again, a new program that we're now required to put into place.
Well, there's a difference between somebody to help you maintain the program, and someone who's going to be the code enforcement person. So,
yeah, this
anyway.
is not this is a coordinator. It's just to help coordinate the program, and we'll probably use a lot of our existing field staff to help with some of the door hangers and things like that.
Okay, Councilmember Price.
Yes, I was going to propose a friendly amendment to increase the fine, but the way you described it, it's a per infraction and on a daily basis. I mean, after one incident, there could be 2, 3, 4. It keeps going up. So I'm not going to proceed in that direction. I do support the resources needed for this. The program implementation coordination. The other issue is if we just continued in terms of, on a complaint basis, with this kind of an approach, I think we really need it to have an enforcement component, and you need to really be able to fund that so that this has some meaning. If we're in a situation where on the books we say we're doing something, but our enforcement is periodic, complaint-based, or whatever, I don't think we're as effective. So I will be supporting the concept you've brought forward, and thank you for your work.
Councilmember Berman.
Well, thank you guys very much for the presentation and the proposal. I just had a couple questions on slide 6, which is the City of Palo Alto cumulative water use reduction. And so I noticed that in February, March, we're below 20%. And as we kind of go into below a 20% reduction, or we had a greater than 20% reduction in water usage from the previous year, and then it starts to go more into that middle range between 10 and 20%. So in between March and April, either that was the launch of the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge, or people started watering their lawns more. I don't know what. Do we have any indication as to what led to that increased usage?
It's a great question. We haven't done a lot of analysis on that. I will add that Palo Alto has a very high seasonal peak to it. So one explanation is that there's the irrigation season starts and you start to see an increase in water. I will say that the messaging takes a while to kind of get out there, mm-hmm. And so even with the governor's declaration and other things happening February, March, you're looking at a couple of months, and unfortunately the state board acted in the middle of July, which is right in the middle of the irrigation season. So by the time we got things moving and everything, now we're into September and October, so it makes things a little bit challenging for us.
And I think thank you for that. And this chart really emphasizes for me the importance of some of the other efforts that we're doing on trying to get people to switch from lawns to more drought-tolerant plants and native plants and that kind of stuff. And I know that the city, and forgive me, I don't know the details of it, but we have a rebate that we offer, I believe, residents who switch from grass to. Could you guys maybe, tell us and the public as well a little bit about that?
You want to go ahead?
Yeah, the term I've heard Vice Mayor Niss use is a droughtless landscape.
That's right.
Good evening, council members, Mayor Shepard, and Vice Mayor Liz Niss. My name is Catherine Elvert. I'm the Utilities Communications Manager, and more recently, I was the city's Water Conservation Program Coordinator. So we work very closely with the Santa Clara Valley Water District on a number of our water conservation programs, including the landscape rebate, which offers incentives for residents and businesses to replace irrigated lawn with a low water use landscape design. Right now, we are matching the Water District's $2 per square foot rebate so that Palo Alto residents and businesses can receive a total of $4 per square foot for this project. It's actually the highest rebate in the world that I'm aware of, the highest rebate ever. We also offer incentives for folks to upgrade their irrigation hardware for more efficient models, including irrigation controllers, and we work very closely with our customers on education about just wise practices.
Great. Thank you very much, and I hope that's the front page headline in the newspapers tomorrow is take advantage of the highest rebate in the world for switching over your landscaping.
We'll put it out there on social media as well.
Perfect. Perfect. Thank you guys very much.
Councilmember Burt.
Well, when Councilmember Berman was starting to talk about the cold water bucket, I thought he was going to be suggesting that we do that to violators at City Hall Plaza. I'm glad you didn't quite go that far. I did want to ask a broad question because these reductions that we are having currently, which probably will come in around 15% at our, after Nico mentioned that the next month's a month-to-month fluctuation with our metering from through the Hetch-Hetchy system. That's on top of reductions that we had done over the last, 15, 20 years that were pretty substantial. And I just wonder if you'd briefly, if you have this rough numbers at the tip of your tongue, refresh us on how much reduction we've had citywide over that period. My recollection, it's a net reduction, not just per capita, but citywide reduction versus our historic baseline.
I don't have the exact numbers, but just to help put it in perspective, we have a supply guarantee from the San Francisco system of 17.07 million gallons per day. We actually used more than that 20, 30 years ago. And now we're currently, I think we're below 12 or around 11 and a half. So, and there's a lot of reasons why that is, and a component of that is conservation. I mean, we invested heavily in that early on, and we got some good results. And we work with our large customers all the time and with our key account folks. And so, I'm not sure if there's, Councilmember Klein can correct me, I'm not sure if there's another Bosque agency that has reduced so far from their supply guarantee as we have, but we're probably, or we're in good company.
Okay, so it sounds like from those numbers that we've citywide over the last 20 years or so reduced our total water consumption by more than a third, while we increased our population by 15%. Okay, that's important, and I think the community doesn't appreciate that. It's a very significant reduction. The interesting thing is that when we go through a drought like this, and we all go through a re-examination of our practices, we find that even though we've done that reduction, there are good opportunities for us to go further and without really harming our lifestyles. We may now have a positive social norm of brown lawns in the middle of drought summers, but the more significant thing is this conversion of lawns to not only more drought-tolerant habitat, but often habitat that actually works for our indigenous species and creates real habitat rather than our lawns. So that's a secondary benefit. And I wish that we had a program for responding to resident complaints about lack of enforcement on leaf blowers. The way that we're going to respond to this, I appreciate those are two different departments in our city, and you're not to be held at fault for that. But it is interesting that we're rightfully moving forward on this, but we have other areas that we blow off enforcement on. Just the final element is that even though I know that we're doing some really diligent work on promoting this turf conversion credits that we do in partnership with the Santa Clara Valley Water District, my neighbors and I think most of the community, for whatever reason, still aren't aware of these, not only the former credits, but now this doubling that we've basically done when the water district doubled theirs and we matched it. And so I would really like to see how we can get that information out there to the community in other ways, featuring on our website. I'm assuming that that's in our utility bill stuffers as well. And I just think that we're going to have to look for a lot of different ways, and maybe we can engage with the press and see if there'll be some feature articles on this and get it out there that way. Thanks.
Councilmember Klein.
Well, I'm not going to continue the parade of praise for Palo Altans on this. Yes, we're doing a good job this year, but yes, everybody else in the Bay Area is as well. Councilmember Byrd asked a very good question as to how come we've had this big reduction from the 17 MGWD, which we once had as a use, and that's why we have it as a what we're entitled to take from the Hetch-Hetchy system. In part, that reduction is due to a change in our businesses in town. When we got the 17, we had a number of companies in town that had manufacturing processes that used a lot of water. Those companies are no longer in Palo Alto, and I don't know the numbers, but they account for a not insubstantial amount of the reduction from the 17 to the, roughly speaking, 12 that we use today. I want us to keep in mind that Palo Alto is at the bottom, about the third or fourth lowest, worst consumer per capita of water among the 26 agencies in Bosca. We use lots of water, and it's primarily because we have extensive lawns, and we love our lawns and our trees. And so when we cut back, we should be able to do 14, 15%, and 20%, whatever, because we have the capacity to do it. In comparison to a place like San Francisco, where of course there are very few lawns, and so they don't have the amount of water going for landscaping that we do. The easiest place to cut back is on landscaping. It's much harder to cut back on use of water inside your house. Yes, you can take shorter showers. Yes, you can run the dishwasher only once every 3 or 4 days, so on and so forth. All those things are good, but the big numbers are in landscaping. And that's why Councilmember Byrd is absolutely right, and that if we're really going to make a bigger impact, it's going to be in reducing water use for landscaping, and thus the conversion program, the rebates make a lot of sense. but the number of people who accepted so far is really low. Do you have that number handy? Last time we talked about it, I think it was only in the double digits.
So I apologize, I can't tell you precisely how many customers have participated in the rebate program. I can tell you, though, that Palo Alto in Santa Clara County has the highest participation of all water retailers in these sort of programs. So it's pretty significant. We can come back to you with the total square footage of turf grass that has been converted in the city. I do want to also add that in running this program, the landscape rebate program, and encouraging our customers to replace lawns with a low water use landscape design, we are working very closely with Canopy, the Palo Alto Garden Club, and other community groups to make sure that we are doing this while protecting the health of the urban canopy.
Good. I'm glad you brought that point up. I sort of alluded to it. The fact that we're leading Santa Clara County cities doesn't mean anything, because the number still could be very low. We might have 40 and somebody else only has 30. But I do remember you gave us a number, I think the last time we had this, that we were I know under 100, which out of, what do we have, 15,000 or so single-family residences, and so that's not a very big number. So we have a lot of room to grow our program in that, and I certainly hope we can. If we have another drought winter, the council hearing this program a year from now is going to be looking at even more draconian solutions.
Okay, with that, why don't we go ahead and vote? And that passes unanimously. Now we have one more item to take up, and then we have a couple closed session items, and it is almost 11 o'clock. Is it our desire to go ahead and push through?
Yeah. So I actually think we should take up the Kirtner thing if it really is. Yeah, I think we should take it up. If it really is 15 minutes, we should do the Kirtner thing. I wanted to ask the city attorney if both closed sessions were required, or if we could put one of them off or two of them off.
So, Councilmember Mayor Shepherd, item number 2, the Golan litigation matter is time sensitive. The last item, which is item number 12, is not time sensitive and could be put over to another night.
I'll move putting over the last item, then the last closed session.
All right. Do we need to vote on that?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, let's go ahead and vote. This is to move the last closed session item off to the next meeting, and that passes unanimously. Moving on to the Kirtner tentative map. Council is to consider the applicant's, well, this is for the address, it's a public hearing for 405 Kirtner Avenue tentative map for 6 residential condominiums. Council is to consider the applicant's request to enable the approved but not yet constructed residential project of 6 multifamily units be subdivided and sold as condominiums instead of rented. The property is located at 405 Kirtner Avenue, and the project is compliant with RM30 zoning development standards and is included in the city's housing element inventory. The clerk has placed the motion council is asked to address on the screen. And you're going to have to toggle the screen so we can see it. After staff introduces the item, I will open the public hearing and accept public comments, starting with the project applicant. After closing the hearing, council will take this item up. If approved, 6 units will be sold as condominiums. If denied, it will remain a rental project. If council wishes to deny the project, we should continue the hearing and request that staff return with required findings. Denying the project, we must make findings as described on packet page number 267. With that, staff.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Shepherd, members of the council. I'm Hillary Gittleman, the planning director. I will be brief. As the mayor indicated, the matter before you is a tentative map that, if approved, would allow a 6-unit building that was approved earlier this year to be sold as condominiums. It's a public hearing, so we're asking that the City Council open the public hearing, invite comments from the public, starting with the applicant, and at the end of the public hearing, Russ Reich, The project planner and I are here to answer any questions you have. We do have one correction to the findings that we'd like to read into the record. Specifically, finding 5 on packet page 271 refers to mitigation measures, or one mitigation measure related to nesting birds. Instead, it should refer to conditions of approval regarding preservation of oak trees on the site. So we're swapping out bird habitat for oak trees. Conditions of approval for mitigation measure. That is the only change we have to, we need to make. Just to emphasize again, the requested action is not about the underlying development project at 405 Kirtner. It's about whether the map should be approved pursuant to the Subdivision Map Act and related sections of the Palo Alto Municipal Code. The Planning and Transportation Commission unanimously recommended approval based on the findings in Attachment A of the staff report earlier this year. That concludes the staff presentation.
Thank you, and I'm going to open the public hearing, and I'm sorry I didn't go over this with you earlier. 3 minutes or 10 minutes for the applicant?
Well, the group doesn't need to spend that much time. I don't know that the council needs 10 minutes on the item.
But we don't need to time, or they're up to 10 minutes, is that what I can?
Hillary, are we treating this, can you do it in 3? How long is your presentation?
I'll set it to 10 and we'll...
That's fine.
Okay. All right, go ahead. Thank you very much,
In interest of your time, I will be very brief. My name is Sal Caruso, 980 El Camino Real, Santa Clara, and I'm representing the project and would like very much to have you approve tonight the project for a condominium subdivision. The project is in compliance with all the standards of the city of Palo Alto, and I look forward to building this project and doing a high-quality project for the city of Palo Alto and satisfying the additional 6 units. Every unit is precious in Palo Alto, and this will provide a good, I know it's hard to use the term, but more of an entry-level product that is smaller and compact that young families can have a start in Palo Alto. Thank you.
Thank you. And I do not have any public comment cards on this. In that case, I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing and turn it back to council. Councilmember Holman.
Hillary, I didn't follow your correction to the findings. My packet, page 271. Could you restate that, please?
Yes, packet page 271 in finding number 5, the explanatory text under that finding. It says the finding cannot be made in the affirmative, and it goes on. The end of that paragraph, it says the project will comply with mitigation measures to protect nesting common birds. It should say the project will comply with conditions to protect on-site trees.
And by inference, the birds that nest in the trees.
Thank you.
So, okay, thank you for that clarification. I appreciate that. I had just one other clarification. Is it okay if I ask one question that isn't about the subdivision?
This is strictly about the subdivision. So
the subdivision is what's on the council's agenda. So incidental and very closely related brief inquiries are probably okay.
Okay.
It was just an inquiry that I didn't have a chance to ask today. That was on packet page 274 at the top. The clarification, it says all exterior building and landscape improvements shall be maintained as shown on the approved plans. And my question was about the word maintained. Does it mean that those improvements will be maintained in terms of retained, or maintained in terms of kept in good order and physically maintained? You know what I mean? And sorry for the question, but I just didn't get a chance to ask it earlier.
Staff tells me that the intent of that is to be maintained in good order through the life of the project.
Okay. All right, good. Thank you for the clarification. So I can, I won't read the whole title here, but I will move staff recommendation.
Okay, Councilmember Holman, would you like to speak to your motion?
I don't think I need to. Thank you.
Vice Mayor Niss, would you like to speak to your second?
Nope.
And I see no lights. Okay, no, I do. Councilmember Schmid.
Just a quick question. Council is about to address the housing element. And I note on packet page 268, it says that this item has been on the housing element for 2007 to 14 and is temporarily listed on the one from 215 to 223. Are we losing 6 units in our new housing element?
Thank you for that question, Councilmember Schmid. These units will still count towards our new housing element because they will be approved in this calendar year. 2014, they'll still count towards our next
2015
That's right.
housing element.
That's correct.
Okay, one other question on packet page 273. It says the applicant shall pay an in lieu below market rate housing fee of 0.9 units. Where does that 0.9 come from?
Ooh, this was discussed at the Planning Commission, and I may have to ask Russ to help address that. I know it's based on our current inclusionary ordinance. This was how the requirement was calculated.
So the 0.9 is 15% of the 6 dwelling units. So it doesn't add up to a full dwelling unit. So they would pay the fractional amount.
Oh, it's 15% of the value of the 6 units. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, I'm in support of this for, the fact it is providing 6, small affordable units for the community. Congratulations.
Seeing no more lights, let's go ahead and vote. And that is unanimous. And I think we made it under 15 minutes, Councilmember Sharp. And we will be now returning to closed session to take up item number 2, which is conference with City Attorney. Yes, thank you very much. We're going to do that now. So let's do council member comments first. And that's the last item on our agenda, our open agenda. Go ahead, Councilmember Burt.
So I would like to bring back this discussion we had under the study session, and maybe the city attorney can help clarify the process, given that what we're really interested in doing is referring some matters to policy and services, I believe, on soft wall and unreinforced masonry matters. Do we need to schedule it before the council in order to refer it to policy and services, or can we? I don't think we can do that now, can we? Just refer
No, but the city manager can make a referral to policy and services. So would the acting city manager be willing to commit that the item will be agendized before policy and services?
Yeah, I don't think that's an issue.
Okay. So then the items that I would look for you to refer to policy or take to before policy and services would be an update to the inventory of this both soft walls and unreinforced masonry, which we may have that update, but or soft story, I should say, instead of soft wall. Sorry. Some staff alternatives regarding how to prioritize the highest risk buildings if such a prioritization is feasible. A referral of best or strongest practices by other cities to enforce these upgrades. A summary of retrofit programs and incentives that exist today, and any staff thoughts on, or a discussion around, I should say, by policy and services of any recommendations that we may have for state legislation to support these initiatives.
I don't know, do we need someone to second it? If so, I'll second it.
I think it takes 2 people to do this.
Do it.
So Councilmember Scharf, are you supporting this?
Yes.
All right. I don't think we vote on it either.
No,
we
we
just,
don't.
We just put it out there. Yeah. So.
And we'll take a look at the workload and timeline and schedules and get back to you.
Okay. 2 more lights. Councilmember Klein.
Yes, I'm very supportive of the referral just made. I would like to add a couple of other things. One is consideration of what financing mechanisms are available for owners to do necessary upgrades or rehabs. And I would also suggest that the staff at least present to us for consideration whether a mandatory program would be sensible.
That's actually consistent with my intent,
Yes,
so
sir.
those are good clarifications.
Okay. Councilmember Holman.
I'm still looking at Councilmember Burt's motion there that should be on the beginning of the second line at soft story. And UMB is unreinforced masonry, so I think it's, what's the acronym for unreinforced masonry? It's not UMB.
I think it is.
Is it? Yeah. It doesn't seem right.
Point of order, that this is not a motion?
Yeah. This is just...
It is what's stated as a motion here.
Yeah, so it should not be stated as a motion. It's a recommendation that the city manager take these items up with policy and services.
And if it's permissible to make a comment?
We can't discuss this.
But we can't have discussion.
Yeah, not discussion, but is it permissible to make a comment on this?
Well, it's my understanding that it's council member comments, questions, and announcements is the item, right?
Okay. So my comment would be, I think it would be more appropriate to send it to ARB first because there are significant impacts and consequences to these kinds of programs that would inform the policy and services.
Vice Mayor Niss.
Mine is not on that topic at all, so this is a completely different topic. And Lalo, I'm sorry I didn't say more during the meeting tonight regarding this, but on Sunday afternoon when the Midtown Association had their ice cream social, so-called, although they ran out of ice cream, which probably was a good sign, almost everyone from staff turned up in some way. Police was there, the emergency prep was there, the people were there from utilities, from many of our different areas. And I think if you send out some kind of thank you to them, that would really be appropriate. And I have just forgotten her name, who does PR for the...
Claudia Key.
Thank you. Who is passing out the 5-minute shower measurement and the little keychain that lights up. And it was just so well done. And a great, Sunday afternoon sort of thing where people could learn and, be out with the kids and even talk to candidates. The last was said very quietly.
We will take care of that tomorrow. We
Okay.
have executive staff meeting tomorrow.
Good.
Great. In that case, I'm going to adjourn this portion of the meeting, and we're going to retire into closed session to meet with the city attorney on item number 2, existing litigation.